Okay, we will move to item 8.
Item number 8, Department and Committee Reports, non-action items. Item 8A, Budget Hearing Process, Sherry Cassidy, CFO of Financial Services.
Good morning, Commissioners. We will have 2 days of presentations, and they'll last until, we've got them scheduled until about 3 o'clock each day. If some of the departments and offices, if we get ahead of time, I'll pull some that's scheduled in the afternoon up to the morning so we can get done earlier. Your binders that you have, it contains the presentation from September 20th, the preliminary balanced budget that I presented on September 20th, and also the office and department presentations and the schedule for today, or for both days. Each office and department will present their updates and also their critical needs. This will be the opportunity for you to ask any questions you have of them, of their general operations or their critical needs. And this is so that you'll be fully informed before the November 8th final direction that you will give. And I'll provide an update on the financial roadmap as the last item scheduled on Thursday. So do you have any questions on the process?
Not at this time. It doesn't look like.
And I do have scheduled in that we will have a lunch break from 12 to 12:45. So if we get a little ahead, I'll slide somebody up so that we'll end close to 12.
All right. Thank you very much.
And do you read who's up
Yes,
next?
I can do the next one for you. Thank you. Item 8B, Clerk and Recorder Office Budget Presentation. Chuck Berman, Clerk and Recorder.
Morning, Mr. President, County Commissioners. Long time no see. Thank you for the opportunity for me to present today before you and the citizens of El Paso County our budget for 2016. The Office of the Clerk and Recorder is the public face of county government. We serve many of our citizens on a daily basis, multiple times throughout the year, either in elections or motor vehicle or in our recording area. We do the elections, the recordings, the marriage licenses, record property records, motor vehicle transactions, liquor licensing for unincorporated El Paso County, and our office also serves as clerk to the Board of County Commissioners. This is our official mission statement. You know, our mission is to provide citizens faster, better, and less expensive services while not sacrificing customer service. To carry out that goal, there are 7 departments within our office. I like my motto, which is Citius Altius Fortius, which in keeping with the Olympic Training Center down the road, I always tell my staff I want to do things faster, higher, stronger. So I'm always striving to do a little better than we did the day before. But they like to have it in this fancy little narrative, so I go with it. Like I said, our office works hard to provide the best in customer service and maximize our efficiencies, and we do that primarily because of the amazing staff that we have. Here is our organizational chart. You have Mary Bartleson, who is our Chief Deputy and Operations Manager. Mary has nearly 30 years of experience with the Clerk and Recorder's Office, having worked in elections, in motor vehicle, all areas and aspects of the county. She has worked very diligently over the years. We have Angie Leith, who heads up our election department and a group of 10 people. We have Jimmy Van Buskert, who also has 10 people that manages our recording department. Kelly Lindgren, who has 132 people in the department. That's comprised of both full-time and part-time people in the motor vehicle areas. And then you can see the breakdown of by the 5 offices we have in the county. Christy Ridlin, who is our public information officer, she has 1 person under her. And then Christy Smart, our manager to the clerk of Board of County Commissioners, has 2 staff members under her. Motor vehicle department, as I said before, we are there to register people's vehicles, process registration renewals, renew driver's license, print plates and placards. We have the 5 offices, including 1 in Fort Carson that we opened up 2 years ago. It is the only one in the country we are the only place in the county to offer Saturday services as well as 24/7 registration renewals at our kiosk. Our election department oversees and administers the elections for El Paso County. Our award-winning department maintains the voter registration system for the county, prepares and mails ballots, hosts voter service and polling centers, provide training for all election staff, and then provides accurate election results. We also administer elections for municipalities and special districts as requested. Our communication department reviews and answers inquiries from the press and the public and other groups, fulfills open records requests made to the clerk and recorder's office, informs the public through outreach and other programs, especially through social media and open house events. That department also tracks legislation that may affect our operations. Our operations department is comprised of many things. Our distribution center out at our Powers and Airport location that is very busy at this time of the year setting up VSPCs. We have a small IT department that interfaces with the county IT, and then we also have logistical support to support the various offices that are under my tutelage. And then we have a finance department of 6 people that collects the revenue, accords, and then disperses it. Statutes and mandates required by our law, by our office. Clerk office and fees are under Title 30 of the Colorado Revised Statute. Motor vehicle and driver's licenses governed under Title 42. Our operations is governed by Title I in the Colorado Revised Statute. Recording is under a number of statutes, Title 30, Title 38, and Title 14. And then our clerk to the Board of County Commissioners is governed by Title 30, and for the Board of Equalization is covered by Title 39. Strategic plans for next year for our office. We spent this past year being very busy in implementing the state's upgrade to the driver's license and motor vehicle module. I really want to turn my attention this next year, something I've wanted to do for a number of years, because I have a father who had many children that went through the state motor vehicle office for their driving instruction. I want to be able to start offering that. So we're going to, after people do their basic operation and skills training for the driver's licenses, I would like to be able to start doing that so our citizens don't have that 2, 3, 4 hour wait. Our Q-Flow, our mechanism that tracks our wait times, is 10 years old, and there's upgrades to the system and many analytical tools that I'd like to take advantage to use predictive analysis to tell us when our peak times are. And also, it can help structure putting different people in different offices to leverage their skill sets and also affecting and reducing wait time. So I want to go after that using our operational reserves to improve that program. And then we have 4 kiosks that's been installed for almost a year. 45,000 people have utilized them since they began about this time last year. We lead the state in that effort. We're partnering with some grocery stores to be able to put those in, one in the southeast along Academy and Hancock in the King Supers, then one up along the Powers corridor, thereby extending services to those to citizens in those areas, and that will be done at no cost for the equipment to our citizens. With clerk to the board, we support the treasurer's office and the assessor's office in their conversion of that, because there's an element, the Board of Equalization, that we use from that system, that VAX system. So we fully support their efforts in going forward to help us deliver that service to our citizens and to each of you a little bit better next year. And then recording, we're going to work aggressively to continue to digitize more and more records so that people have the ability to review them online. An overview of some of the stuff we've done this past year. So in 2017, we did 158,000, almost 500 documents that we recorded in recording. We did a little less. There's been a few, with rising interest rates, there's been a few less refinancing this year. We are projecting to do a little bit more next year at 160,000. Total documents we processed, we estimate it's going to be 192,000, a little less than last year, but we think there'll be an uptick for 2019 to 202,000. vehicles that we've registered, we're continuing to grow and grow and grow. We think we'll be at 192,000 by the end of the year, over the 568,000 last year, and we think in 2019 we'll be well over 600,000. In driver's license, we continue to see an increase in the number of people utilizing those services. We'll think we'll do about 114,000, about 2.5% more than this year. Precincts, we are currently at 282. We added a few this year. We had to split some. We are still growing. We have a number of precincts that need to have our attention for next year. We have 87 precincts that are in the 1,200 to 1,500 number of registered voters range. Statute like to see us keep them under 1,500. We're allowed to go to 2,000 under your approval, but something that we have to keep our eye on those 87 precincts. But we do know we have 124 precincts that are at that level that we're going to have to subdivide here in the next year.
Question here, Commissioner Waller.
I think you just pretty much answered the question. So you anticipate that we're going to have to subdivide some precincts and then probably redraw the maps again?
We will not. We are unable to at this time under state law because of...
I'm sorry, I meant after the election cycle and into next year.
We are prohibited until after the 2020 census to do any redistricting at the county level.
Oh, wow.
So the only thing we can do at this point is we can keep the boundaries of the precincts the same, but we can split those precincts that already exist in half. We'll find some major boundary, major road in those precincts. So we'll have additional precincts, but there will be no redistricting of commissioner districts. That's not permissible under state statute until the 2020 census. And we predict probably by the time they get with pulling all that data that we're probably looking at the 2022 time frame to possibly look at commissioner district redistricting.
Interesting, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
What's that?
Sorry. So it basically will be 4 years before any of the commissioner districts are updated then?
That is correct.
Wow, okay.
That is correct. Voter service and polling centers, the number that we are required to have is a multiple of our population, so we see that continuing to grow to where we'll be around 32 registered voters. We'll be nearly 400,000 in 2019. Our public information officer has worked very aggressively in getting us earned media, largely in the area of motor vehicle services, educating our public, and then in the elections. So last year we had about 151,000 of earned media. This year we think we're going to get about $193,000 worth of earned media. So without having to pay for that, we've been able to educate citizens on how to interface and services in the clerk and recorder's office. A metric I like to throw out there is our kiosks. I just wanted to show you the growth that we're seeing in that area. It's a very popular service. It's some way that we can get our citizens in and out the door quickly, especially during this time in drives when wait times have been a bit higher here the last 2 months. Capital projects. Our security cameras in both our Powers office and Union Town Center office are the old analog types, and they're deteriorating, and the images are getting very grainy and dark to see. So for security purposes, and then also to detect fraud, because we sometimes have law enforcement that will come in and ask for footage of a transaction that was conducted, it's hard to make out details. So we'd like to upgrade to digital technology. And that's going to take approximately $140,000, but I will let you know, as we have done in the past, when it come to equipment upgrade, whether it was our election equipment upgrade in 2017 or our ballot sorter that we purchased this year, we're going to cover that cost. I just want to make you aware of that we are internalizing that and using our operational reserves to cover that. Because we are growing in the county, we would like to continue to offer more and more ballot drop-off boxes. We would like to install 4 additional ones. There is some movement in the state legislature to require counties to pay for return postage. I would like to get a hold of that, ahead of that curve if that was to happen, and just offer more and more opportunities for people to utilize those drop boxes.
Commissioner Waller.
What would that cost us if they pass that legislation?
It depends on the number that is returned. So if you're looking at 25%, so let's say in a presidential election, you're at over 300,000, so you're talking 75,000 ballots at, 50 to 71 cents. It could be 35 to, upwards of $60,000, $70,000 per election. So in a presidential year where we have the presidential primary, and then the primary in June, and then the presidential, it could get to be a considerable amount of money. So I want to try and offer as many opportunities for people can do it for free.
Well, your office is fat, so you can absorb that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So just doing quick math, just on a calculator instead of in public, but, if we had 200,000 ballots returned, I mean, we're talking $142,000 every election for that, and it's,
If everyone elected to return and have us pay the postage,
Yeah.
but I think we've made it convenient where about 75% of people use the drop boxes,
Right.
about 25%.
are we thinking about putting one out, possibly Falcon area, with some of the new development that's out there?
We do have one at the Falcon Fire Station there
Okay.
on Meridian
Okay.
and 24, but yeah, someplace further,
Further east.
north of there. Look in the Broadmoor area, the southeast area around Hancock and Academy. There's a couple of locations that I think we can serve better.
Okay.
Budgetary highlights for this past year, voter registration continues to climb, especially with unaffiliates participating in primaries and becoming more engaged in that process. So we'll continue to look at ways that we can be efficient and more effective on the 4 drop boxes that I spoke of. Our aging of our security equipment, we need to enhance that so that we can keep our clients and our staff in a safe place and record any things that may be of interest to law enforcement. And then this past couple months have been a challenge with drives. The first couple weeks was an hour or 2, 3-hour wait time. We have worked and pushed that down to where we're at like between 34 and 40 minutes on any given day. We still have a ways to go. It does appear like it takes about 40% more time to do a transaction. I'm waiting for that learning curve to continue to play out to see where we're at. I may need to look internally for other ways that I can save money and still add additional folks onto the counter. For the year, we are at 26 minutes average wait times. Before drives, we were at 20, so you can see it's increased our wait times by about 6 minutes, but we're going to continue to strive and push that down. Here is our base budget. It is almost identical to last year. The only changes is we moved $10,000 from motor vehicle into the driver's license to enhance some services there. And then we no longer do HR internally. We have turned that over to county HR and the transfer of about $54,000 to them to fund that position to support us. So with that, do we have any questions?
Any questions? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just asked Henry the question, but I'll just ask you for the record here. For the capital projects that you have identified on page 11, those are embedded in the proposed balanced budget?
No, they are not in the proposal to you. I'm
Okay.
going to absorb them. I just want to make you aware that those are projects that I think are critical and important to our office, and that through our funds that we'll absorb and do that. I just want to make note that we will continue to invest from our proceeds every year from the collection of fees from citizens to continue to enhance our customer experience.
Thank you.
All right?
And I guess just for the public, just for clarification, so are you asking for any additional critical needs?
I am not asking the board for anything additionally, which I think is probably meets with a big smile on each of your faces.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, we'll open it up too if there's anybody in the audience that has any questions with regard to the clerk and recorder's budget presentation. Okay, seeing none.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
With that, I will call item 8C, Public Works Budget Presentation. Scott Culbertson, Executive. I'm trying to think if it's interim Executive Director, Department of Public Works.
Good morning, Mr. President, Commissioners, for the next 6.5 hours. No, I'm just kidding. The Public
Denied.
Works,
Denied.
denied, okay. Our organizational chart remains pretty constant. I want to point out just a couple of minor changes. Safety coordinator's gone back to HR, so they can take a broader view of the county, and the recovery manager will move to.
Can you pull that
Office of
mic up a little
Emergency
bit
Management.
closer?
Sorry.
There you go. That's all right.
Okay, usually I have my command voice.
Yeah.
Our Fleet Management Division, as you know, is a very busy organization, and they are continuing to improve and support all the equipment for all of the county offices. The bulk of their energy is on our Public Works equipment. We continue to improve our operation with your approval. We're in the process of installing an automated truck wash, which will make us tremendously more efficient in terms of getting our fleet out the door and clean following a storm. We are moving forward with our anti-icing treatment. They're installing the equipment right now. We hope to have that up and running by the end of the calendar year, which will allow us to prepare for treating the storms ahead of the time, and then it will reduce our costs over time in snow removal. Some of our successes, we have had tremendous improvement in utilization of our bulk fuel resources, reduction in use of our fleet cards, which is a relatively small portion of the budget, but the savings per gallon is significant. With your assistance and approval, we've been able to replace 24 of our medium and heavy pieces of equipment, and just this week we received in a number of the light vehicles to allow us to improve the quality of the fleet across the county. We'll be replacing some 16, 17-year-old vehicles that have airbag sensor issues for most of the departments. Our weekend preventive maintenance shift continues to improve, continues to be more efficient, which allows us to have better equipment availability during the work week for our traditional crew operations. And you can see the numbers there and the number of work orders they complete, about a third of which are preventive maintenance. The ongoing budget needs for fleet services, we're increasing by about $400,000 this year, and we'll have 2.325 for capital replacement. That does not include the potential reclaimer equipment lease that we've discussed previously. Critical needs for fleet services that we intend to fund internally. We're going to start a program to methodically replace our hydraulic lifts. Many of them are old. We're concerned about the long-term health of those and the safety of our workforce, so we'll start about a 5-year process to replace those. And we continue to improve and look for ways to rapidly replace our light fleet without a significant cost increase. Office of Emergency Management, we continue to be very busy in this area. We continue to be ready to respond for all organizational needs as necessary, supporting first responders during emergencies, and continue to refine our long-term recovery process. We continue also to assess and mitigate hazards. The statutory requirement for the Office of Emergency Management. We continue to work with many local organizations. We have improved the number of CERT members that we have in the county and continue to train them on a regular basis to respond to any emergency as needed. You can see the laundry list of plans that they were able to complete in 2018. Lots of declarations, delegations, evacuations, so on. In-process plan updates are for recovery, access and functional needs, debris management, Ute Pass evacuation, which as you know is a unique challenge, and our damage assessment process. Our hazmat team continues to identify challenges and continues training the members of their team. Just to give you an idea of the numbers, we had 8 fires this year. Hazmat, as you can see, has responded to 56 events, over 800 notifications, and I'll remind you that there are currently 2 hazmat techs in the county, so those guys are pretty busy. Continue to work with the Office of the Sheriff and the fire districts, and continue ongoing training for those local fire departments and for hazmat responses as needed. OAM budget has a slight increase for salary, and you see their critical needs are replacement hazmat suits and bunker gear, which they intend to fund using their existing budget. And the long-term ongoing needs are the long-term replacement of PPE and their vehicle fleet. As it ages, we need to have a strategy to replace those pieces of equipment. Fleet and OEM work together to come up with the best solutions for those replacement vehicles as we move forward. On engineering and highway side, these are the critical tasks we perform. I don't want to highlight the bottom one, the MS4 permit. There's some very significant increases in our requirements for permit compliance that come into effect in 2019. We have worked with the county administrator, and we will be building a stormwater division within the Office of Engineering that will include a number of inspectors and some engineering support. You'll see our numbers here for lane miles of paved roads. That's an increase of about 40 miles. Gravel roads remain about the same. And you can see the rest of the numbers on here. These are significant challenges for us with our fleet, with our manning. And we continue to look at ways to refine our processes and improve the quality of the work that we do. The statutes that we are governed by. Strategic goals, we continue to work through the grant application process to solve the I-25 gap issue. We continue to work on the expansion of public transportation opportunities and enhance public understanding of the true cost of deferred capital projects and maintenance. We're working on transparency and collecting new data, new pavement quality index data, new average daily travel data, and an asset management process to allow us to better capture and articulate our needs. As you can see, in 2018, we had a few significant projects completed, 3 bridges replaced, the West Side Avenue Action Plan continues, Gatley Road and Colorado Center pedestrian improvements, and the Las Vegas drop structure continues, and as well as a significant work on Old Pueblo Road and Judge Orr culvert replacement. You can see a significant number of maintenance requests throughout the year that we have responded to, and we continue to improve those numbers as we can. A list of our significant capital projects. Of course, I-25 gap is one familiar to all of you. The next several are the ones that were funded with the Tabor money that the taxpayers allowed us to have. The South Academy overlay is now a complete project. The others are under either design or construction, as you can see. The rest of these projects we will continue to seek additional funding for as we go down the road. As you can see, our engineering department has their hands full as we prepare for these projects. On the safety side improvement, this year were able to purchase and put into use traffic crash attenuators, essentially a large safety truck to put behind our work crews in the right-of-way, so that if a vehicle were to stray out of the lane of travel and into them, it would hit this truck and keep the crew safe. It would protect the crew from getting hurt. We continue to upgrade our traffic signals. We talked about our...
Question here, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, a quick question. It's actually back a couple charts, but you had the transportation capital projects.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to figure out, it might be in the column called ECD, but what is the year that you intend on funding this? I mean, this is not 2019 projects. This is all future projects? Is that what this list is?
So the first page, the page I have up now,
Yeah.
underneath I-25, the first from Mark Shuffle down to South Academy are the Tabor funded projects. The ECD is the estimated completion date for those projects. Some of them, as you know, are long-term. From start of design to end of construction, it takes a couple of years. Does that answer your question?
Sure. And then from 105 down, because I think you said Mark Shuffle to South Academy or Tabor, and then from 105 down are just, I guess I can't tell from this list, but maybe you're going to show it later in the chart, which of these are going to be funded in 19, unless the ECD column is showing that.
So I probably owe you a start date on some of these. We're focusing right now on those Tabor projects for the 19 timeframe. And Jen, did you have anything you want to add on that? Let me make sure I don't misspeak.
Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. As you know, typically many of our projects are not singly funded by one source. There's several funding sources over a period of time because they go from design and construction. Some of those projects take 2 to 3 years. So because this is a high-level presentation, we did not include that kind of detail, but we can go ahead and provide that separately for you. But most of these projects, a lot of them are underway as far as in the design phase or in the construction phase. And then you have in the chart where you have probably the last page of the chart, you have some TBDs. And those are some projects we just kind of wanted to give you a highlight on, is that those are projects that are coming, have already been planned for, but we haven't been able to start yet. Many of these projects have different funding over various sorts of years. So some of them federal fund, some of them PPRTA fund, some of them are partially funded. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. This is higher level, multiple years. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Commissioner Wilson?
So just looking at those, Jennifer, you may not want to leave. I may have a question so that you guys can answer, you and Scott. So on some of the ones that are like 2019, 2020, so for example, the Highway 105 property acquisition, one for completion date in 2020. I'm assuming then if it's completion date of 2020, it's going to be started in 2019. And we see an $880,000 shortfall for that. Also going down to the Glen Eagle Struthers roundabout, a $2.1 million shortfall for those as well for completion in 2019. Am I correct in assuming that that's kind of the, okay.
Correct, and some of those don't have, when we say shortfall, some of them don't have funding today, but we're expecting some of that funding to come from 2019, from our internal budgetary.
Okay.
So not asking for additional funds at this point, we're just kind of showing you where we are today.
Okay.
Commissioner Waller?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I know we're talking about a lot of capital projects that are going to be going out years into the future, not just in the 2019 budget cycle, but they'll be carrying on, 2020, 2021, 2022, and on out. As you all know, we've got a ballot initiative on the ballot this year to reinstate the public safety sales tax. It's about $22 million of the sheriff's budget that gets made up by that public safety tax. For whatever reason, the voters decide not to reinstitute that tax this year, to continue it going on, that $22 million. Well, obviously, that's not going to come out of the sheriff's budget. Those dollars are going to have to be backfilled, with record number of prisoners in our jail currently. So here's my question to you. If this does not pass this year, how is that going to impact projects that were going to be started in 2019, 2020, even though it doesn't end until January of 2021? Is that going to, have some sort of impact on the capital projects moving forward? Because the reality is it's coming out of your budget if it doesn't pass.
Mm-hmm. So, Commissioner, to answer your question, if that deficit were to come, and we would have to obviously reduce the funding from the general fund to Road and Bridge Department. We would have to take a hard look at the projects we're doing, and some of them would have to come to a halt or get deferred. You want to add on that?
But the question would be that's going to start in 2019.
Right.
In the upcoming budget cycle because of the uncertainty related to whether or not it's going to continue after 2021.
Right, we would have to immediately start deferring some of those projects, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
I guess stated in another way would be that I believe we would have an additional budget session immediately following the election to revisit this issue. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just clarify, I think that would come out of everybody's budget. Thanks.
Well, if you take it as a proportional share, it's going to mostly come out. You can't really take it out of the sheriff's budget. Maybe you think you can, but it's a record number of inmates. I think the most attractive place that it's going to come from, and the largest share of it would have to come out of roads and bridges. I agree with you. It is going to come from everywhere, but I think the biggest share of it ends up coming from them.
And notice he used the word attractive when he was talking about your departments.
He's talking about me, not my budget, right?
Without a doubt. It's the beard.
Yeah. Commissioners, most likely we would need to freeze the road funds along with a lot of other cuts we would probably have to make. So, thanks.
Yep.
I think that's why they pay you guys the big bucks. Is that right?
Yes. Okay.
Any other
continue.
questions on capital projects? Okay. Back to our cost-saving measures. Again, the anti-icing over time will allow us to reduce our costs for snow removal and reduce the amount of labor involved in that. This past season, we were able to replace all of our lawn mowers and tractors and the decks and allow us to get more mowing done at a lower cost. And again, the upgrading and replacing of critical heavy equipment is allowing us to get more labor out on the roadway and spending less money on parts over time on those pieces of equipment. One of the great success stories was we had, if you recall, several significant wildland fires that our mechanized crews were able to go out and in some cases save some homes by cutting line for the fire crews. Our Highway and Engineering Division rapid response to a couple of critical incidents, for example, Old Pueblo Road and Boca Raton Heights washout. We were able to get that road back open in a partial status within the weekend after it occurred. And another great success story is the Tabor retention projects that are all ongoing. Some of our opportunities for success in the future, we've talked about the gravel road reclamation system. As we implement that starting in 19, more into 20, you'll start to see a significant impact on our maintenance of gravel roads and allow us to reinvest labor into the additional remaining portions of our gravel road network. I touched earlier on the stormwater quality management program. We will get that ramped up and be ready to meet our requirements for the July 2019 needs under our MS4 permit. And under our asset management program, once established, we will get a complete inventory of the current numbers and status of all of our roadway hardware, if you will. Roadway furniture, I think is the term they use. Some of our challenges, again, long-term funding strategy for both maintenance and capital improvement programs continue to be a challenge for us. There are some state-mandated utility requirements that they're going to create additional work for us before we maintain gravel roads, as an example, or any of the other work we must do. And we talked about the MS4 permits. You can see our backlog in paved road maintenance continues to increase. And we're able to work on about 2% of those roads per year. Under the MTCP, you see that we have about a $24 million a year shortfall.
Question here, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we've talked. We'll continue to go through this, and I appreciate the briefing. We have talked a lot about capital improvement funding. These are things like for new trucks and new equipment to maintain and repair roads, and I appreciate the briefings that you have provided all of us to talk about the value of those things. And I just think it's important to make a point on the record. We all know the economy is great right now. We just don't know how long this is going to go. Maybe another 2 years, maybe 3, maybe 4, but eventually we will have a downturn. So this capital equipment is material, it's equipment that is replacing old equipment with new equipment, and that new equipment has a greater amount of efficiency in it and is going to deliver more lane miles of repair for the same amount of labor, more lane miles of construction or whatever, however you want to describe it. And I think that that is actually an important part of us being ready should we have an economic downturn, which we know will happen, we just don't know when it will happen. Because had we not been doing this, we would have been in a position of having really old equipment trying to survive the next economic downturn. It would have been very, very difficult. So I am looking forward to seeing that increased, over the years, starting now and going forward, seeing that increased productivity from the, from your team. That will allow us to continue to do these kinds of things, even more so in an economic downturn, because if we can just hold on to the labor, we'll have the equipment that will allow us to continue to do that work.
Yeah, Commissioner, you make an excellent point. We are setting the conditions for success on the maintenance program side of the house by improving our equipment posture and our readiness, if you will, of that equipment. Some of the older stuff we've had to fabricate parts for, and it gets very challenging. By becoming more efficient with the equipment and adding in, for example, the reclaimer process into our kit bag, it allows us to prepare for the best investment of our labor that we can in those roadways.
Okay.
I think we probably talk this one to death, but gravel road maintenance continues to be a challenge for us. This year, we're able to complete 24 miles of re-graveling, and we would like to get to a 5 to 7 year cycle at some point in the future. By moving on to the gravel road reclaimer process, it'll allow us to have better quality roads until we can get to that point. Our budget,
Before you leave that, I mean, touch on the fact that, I mean, even recently, we've had requests for people that want us to be able to look at our budget and determine whether or not we could actually change from a gravel road to, let's say, a surfaced road, and our likelihood of being able to do that.
at the moment, our likelihood to do that is very small, particularly in residential areas. There are several segments of gravel road that are extremely high average daily travel, somewhere over 3,000 trips a year. There's a segment of Eastonville Road, I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, that we are looking at converting from gravel to pavement. We get numerous requests to convert neighborhood gravel roads to pavement, and it's just simply not a practical matter. It's not as simple as slapping some pavement down on the existing gravel roadway. You actually have to essentially start over and build it with all of the drainage and all of that. And it's a very high cost, somewhere between, depending on what you start with, between $1 and $2 million a lane mile to do so, and we simply aren't funded for that.
And does that require, like, the neighborhood to collectively be on the same page with wanting to do that and create a special district? What's that process?
There is a process that is fairly arduous by which they could do that, create an LID or PID, and essentially the neighbors would foot the cost of that. In an example I'm recently thinking of, there was like 120 homes, about 6 miles of roadway. You're looking at $8 to $10 million to do that. That's a fairly significant voluntary task that most neighborhoods aren't really willing to take on once they know the details.
Okay, great. Just wanted to get that on the record.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Pardon me. Our annual budget this year, last year we were able to get some one-time funding because of the Tabor funds come back to us of $6 million. This year we have a potential increase of $7 million. You'll see how we break that down, with about $900,000 of it going to the stormwater management program, and about $2 million of it going into our gravel road reclamation program. And we have about $2.4 million in capital project needs that we addressed earlier, capital construction projects. That gives us about $1.6 million for additional pavement. And what we're doing is posturing, using those funds to address 50% of our road network by starting this reclamation process. And then in future years, the anticipated funding on our 5-year budget, we can focus on a little bit more on the paved roads once we're currently in the collection of data on current pavement quality index, and we'll move forward on those. And again, I want to emphasize that continued investment in our workforce is critical. Our employees work their tails off for very little money. As we can, as an organization, take care of them. It is greatly appreciated by our employees. Stability in our workforce is critical, and your support on that is greatly appreciated.
Okay.
And with that, I'll take your questions.
Questions? Commissioner Littleton.
Thanks. Just a couple. I am going to assume, and I wouldn't know, but if we, in January of 2019 or soon thereafter, move to a regional Office of Emergency Management, I'm assuming that budget would just follow that then?
I believe that's the case, but I'll defer to the CFO.
Okay.
I assume the budget follows OEM if it goes? Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought. And then if I understand this correctly, on page 27, I think right before the questions, it was your last page, you were talking about 2019 critical needs of about $7 million. Is that correct?
That is correct, and we're not asking for an additional $7 million. That is our anticipated amount coming to us from this budget.
Okay. So if you had an extra $7 million, what would you do with it?
Probably buy lottery tickets so I can pay for the rest of it. No. If this board decides additional funds come to us, we would invest it in roadways based on the priorities established by yourselves and with the assistance of our engineering department. You want to comment on that?
Okay.
Yeah, we have $7 million scheduled in the critical needs listing, so that's the $7 million that's up there.
Okay.
So is that your question? Was that your question? Sorry.
Kind of,
Okay.
but I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. More just a comment. So, although I do receive a lot of calls on public safety, marijuana issues, which is a big deal, and some code enforcement and DHS questions, what I receive by far the most information and feedback from constituents are roads and infrastructure. And so I'm very supportive of the roadmap plan that the county staff has put forward in supporting the additional funding for our roads and infrastructure needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other questions?
Thank you,
Great.
Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Did the district attorney have a hard start time? Or should we take a recess, or how do you want to proceed?
We could take a 10-minute recess if you'd like.
Okay, we will do that. We'll stand in recess for 10 minutes. We're now back on the record.
We are now on item 8D, District Attorney's Office Budget Presentation. Dan May, District Attorney. Good morning.
Good morning, Dan May, District Attorney. I think they're pulling up my PowerPoint here, so we'll just take a second. And I assume I can click that forward with this. Okay, we'll test it, and there we go. I'll go through our, some of it you have seen, but I know sometimes new people in the public are watching, and so it's important to talk a little bit about what the DA's office does. In fact, I know we have one of our new commissioners here who's watching also today, so I think it's important that they know as they come into office in January what all we do.
Well, you already know the results, don't
We
you?
do have an election to get through, but I think she's hopeful that she's going to get there.
Well, I'm pretty confident. How's that?
Your lips to God's ears.
I'm glad that was the district attorney that said that.
When the independent endorses her, I figure that's a pretty good sign that she's got some pretty good strength across the board, conservative and elsewise, in terms of going forward. I want to go through with you today a little bit of the trends as we go through this. I'll go through the history of our office a little bit and some of the things we do. I'll go through some of the trends with you we're seeing and how that's impacting my office. Again, I'll go through some of the accomplishments we have, and again, you're going to be very proud of the DA's office and individuals in our office who have won individual awards this year that are very prestigious, which again is an example of how outstanding a group we have over there at the DA's office. To start off with, we have just the mission of the DA's office. I know many of you have seen this before. Our main mission there is to do justice. And that's not only just our mission that we put in our mission statement, but quite frankly, that's what the Supreme Court has put on us. That's what the statutes have put on us, that we are to seek justice. A lot of people don't realize when we walk in the courtroom, we don't represent a particular person or a particular party. We represent the people of the state of Colorado. So that as we walk in there, we not only represent the victim, we represent the defendant. We represent the public. We represent the police. And so it's very important to teach our people we're to do justice. So we should be as proud of the case that we say we're prosecuting this to the max, trying to get a life sentence or maybe even the death penalty. At the same time, we should be equally proud of the case that we say we're dismissing this because this person is innocent. And so that's really what our job is over there. We really advocate for victims, partner with law enforcement and citizens to really put in prevention programs also. If we can prevent crime right up front, that's obviously the best of all. And the Not One More is a good example of that, where we had, I think it was 10 murders of babies. In 2011, the Not One More group came together, and it's still met. We met yesterday again on programs that we're still doing, and we saw our baby deaths, particularly shaken baby, just stop. For babies that are born in this community. So it's an example of where we partner for prevention. We are governed by the Constitution. I am a little different than others that are presenting in front of you, and that I am state government. We are a quasi-state entity. We are multi-county. And so as you have others present to you, it could be someone for the departments. You have other elected officials that are county elected. I'm actually a state agency by Constitution. There are 22 elected DAs. If you go back in the history, when the state first formed, there were 4 judicial districts. The 4th at that time, and I've shown you that map in the past, but we figured you've seen it enough. We kind of went from one end of the state to the other. I think we encompassed 12 of the original 26 counties in the state of Colorado. It takes a constitutional amendment to change the judicial districts, and today we have 22. They range from 1 county to 7 counties. I think it's the 13th up there. Let's see, I guess that one's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's, maybe it's out there in the 7th. I think one of them 7 counties. Pueblo is a single county, as you can see. Denver's a single county. We're 2 counties. You are the primary portion of my budget. You're approximately 97, 96, 97, 90, 95% of our budget, and the remainder comes from Teller County when you're a multi-county. It wasn't that long ago that Douglas County was actually part of the 4th. There's been some talk about splitting the 18th. Douglas has grown so much. El Paso County, goes back and forth with Denver on the largest populated county in the state of Colorado. For judicial districts, because of Douglas and Arapahoe, they're almost 1 million people, whereas I'm about 725,000. I am bigger than Denver, if you will, because we add another 25,000 for Teller County in terms of population. So there's been some discussion of breaking up the 18th a little bit. In our office, again, we cover Teller and El Paso. I have 22, which we've got on the next couple screens up. There it is, a couple screens up. But we have 22 different law enforcement agencies from federal to state to local that bring cases to our office to prosecute. I have 81 attorneys at this point. We are one of the 3 largest DA's offices in the state of Colorado, just by number of attorneys. I have 22 sworn investigators. Primarily what they're doing is the law enforcement brings us 32,000 cases a year, and they are helping prepare those cases. It could be that they need to advance more information from what law enforcement has done in the case, or maybe hunting down defense witnesses to talk to them as we prepare for trial. But there are certain original investigations we do. You may have a conflict in an agency that they can't maybe investigate one of their own, and we'll step in on that. Voter fraud actually is mandated by law that the DA's office investigates voter fraud. And so we have to do that by law, and no other agencies. Actually, the Attorney General could, and sometimes we get him to weigh in, but typically they're going to take it to the local DA. So there are certain investigations we're mandated by law. Most of it's preparing our cases for either trial or disposition. We have 123 other support staff. Actually, we don't have up here. We typically have at any time about 125 volunteers that we'll have during the year, which is one of the ways we're able to keep a reasonable budget at the same time. And actually, since I'm on here and people are watching this, ours is one of the best places to volunteer at. If people want to come down, you name it, we do it. I'll advertise. We get a lot of volunteers, and they really get a lot of, they really enjoy the work because it is fun work. We have currently 17 district court judges. You're going to see as we go through this, there's a proposal now to add 2 more district courts, which right now look like they'd be criminal, and so that'll be part of my budget process that you'll see going forward is if they open up 2 criminal district courts, I got to man them, so I've got to have the personnel to put in those courtrooms. And we'll discuss that as we go along. We have 11.
Question here, Commissioner Waller.
Yep, thank you, Mr. President. When would those 2 new courts come into effect? My understanding is that's going to be a bill before the legislature this year?
It is, and we'll jump ahead, and that way we'll save time later.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, not a problem. The state judicial, as I understand it, is proposing to the legislature for a number of different courts around the state. We're not the only ones. I think Denver's the other one, and there may be a third. They're proposing 2 new courtrooms in El Paso County for district court based on the numbers and how they're overwhelmed over there. One would come in July of 2019, and you'll see how we built that into our budget going forward. The other would be July of 2020. So they do it over those 2 years. Commissioner Waller, would know better than I. You've been up in the legislature. I assume they'll be presenting the JBC this month, Joint Budget Committee. That the JBC will make it a priority or not, and you can tell me how state judicial does. They'd actually vote on it in the long bill next year in terms of whether they'll put those into their budget or not.
Yeah, and here's the reason I asked that question. I think that, generally speaking, the legislature is willing to do what state judicial is asking for in that circumstance. Typically, if there was a problem, it would be the other way. Some of the smaller jurisdictions that can't absorb the cost of adding a courtroom might say, no, thank you, we're not ready for it this year. So a couple of questions. First of all, are both of these courts going to be criminal courts? So you'd anticipate having to staff them?
Right. It would be up to the courts of how they want to divide them up. And you find that around the state, they kind of do them differently. In Arapahoe, for instance, they'll have just, let's say, a half dozen judges. All they do is criminal, and that's it. Down here, our judges split. They'll be either half of one thing or half of another. And they'll usually split half their docket civil, half their docket criminal. The other is domestic, or what you think of as divorce cases. When I say that, is the other. So that, for instance, Judge Bentley, I believe over there is just civil and domestic. Most of them are criminal and civil. In talking with the chief judge, Judge Bain, he indicates currently they are proposing that both of those will have a criminal docket.
So that means adding all new, in addition to 2 new lawyers, you're talking new paralegals,
Got it.
support staff, kind of the whole kit and caboodle to go in those courtrooms, right?
Correct. We work on a team system in our office, which you'll see when we go to that, but we have a team, and a team for us in district court is 2 courtrooms. And each courtroom will have 2 attorneys, a team leader, and then the support staff for it, an investigator, a victim advocate, a paralegal, a legal assistant, and they work on a team handling all the cases in those 2 courtrooms. So by the time we get to, if they keep on the budget proposals they have now, by July of 2020, I've got to have a team for them to be able to handle those courts.
And for the, I know you said for the 2019, when you're kind of factoring that into the budget this year, have you thought about and factored in the one that's coming in 2020 as well?
We have, and you'll see that as we go through the budget presentation. We did make a mistake in ours, and I'll be showing you that, where we've added, we forgot 2 attorneys, quite frankly, but you'll see that. The others are already factored in. I know that much of the budget has been proposed with the other elected officials, and our needs, if we need them, are already factored in from those meetings. But if it turns out they either don't give the courts or they get postponed, I have seen that where sometimes they'll postpone up in the legislature. Sometimes that can depend on who gets voted into office up in the legislature and who gets the higher priorities as they're debating their long bill. So if they get postponed, then even though it's been worked into the budget right now that we've talked about previously, something you can eliminate because we wouldn't need it then.
So given all of this growth that's coming in the criminal courts, and I understand that felony filings are up over 30%, and we're seeing a pretty significant demand on your office. Yeah. As you know, we have the public safety tax on the ballot this year, and if for some reason the voters decide not to continue that moving forward, which is completely, the right of the voters to do, what kind of impact is that going to have on yours? I kind of, did the quick math and calculated it out. That's $22 million that goes into the sheriff's budget. Well, obviously the sheriff's office isn't going to absorb a $22 million hit. That's over a third of his budget being cut. So if that kind of came equally, as Commissioner Gonzalez pointed out, it's not all going to come out of roads and bridges, but if we did it equally, it'd be about a 6 or 7% cut for each department moving forward. How do you absorb that? What do you do? What would be your plan moving forward? Would you ask state judicial to just say, no, thank you, we don't want that new court in 2020? Or how do you handle that?
Well, it is a 2-step process. One, if the voters don't pass it, I think the first thing is whether the commissioners are going to make the sheriff's office eat the entire $22 million or whether you're going to spread that across the county. Even if only the sheriff's office eats the entire $22 million, that does affect, I guess, our public safety for our community. It means he'll have to cut back his patrols, his investigations, and probably even his, with the jail, there's a certain amount of people you have to have there for safety purposes, so it probably impacts more people like in Falcon that need the extra patrol out there these days as they've grown. And because he, by statute, is required to have the jail. The other areas are needed for public safety, but those are the areas he most predominantly would have to take cuts, which affects public safety, which affects my crime rate. But I guess to a certain extent, I'd probably get less cases coming over from the sheriff's office because they're not solving the crimes. So that's sort of what happens if he has to absorb it all or the majority of it. If it's spread out, I've gone through that in 2008, 2009. As when I got elected, that was the first year that we had that huge tax decrease. We had to make decisions in our office. My office is 95% personnel. 5% is not personnel, so that's cuts for me of people. When you start cutting people, you're losing your efficiency of your office. You lose some of the major, it's hard, you have to then prioritize how much do you put personnel towards, let's say, drunk driving, which is a public safety issue, versus murder cases. You've got to then adjust your personnel in terms of what cases you can really prosecute. You've got to adjust your priorities at that point. Just like the sheriff, I guess, would be adjusting his patrol areas and what cases they can prioritize. It also meant for us, when we went through some of those cuts, units, that you had to look at a unit that was developed to handle a particular area that maybe you now have to disband. I had to disband our forfeitures unit, for instance. In the cuts, we had to relook at funding for our diversion programs. Those are the ones that aren't mandated by law but have a big impact on our community in terms of public safety. But that's when I had to have to look at those kind of things, prioritizations. Does that answer your question?
Very much so, thank
Been there,
you.
done that.
Commissioner Wilson?
Thanks. And I think when we look at this, going from 17 to potentially 19 district court judges, one of the things that you can help clarify on the record is that for El Paso County and Teller County, the municipalities within those areas don't help fund any of this. Is that correct?
That's correct. You bear the burden as El Paso County of a number of things. It's sort of like the municipalities don't have a jail. They can rely on the sheriff for that. Well, that's your budget. Even though I know in my felony courts, last time I looked, 70% of my felony cases came from the Colorado Springs Police Department. You don't have any vote on the Colorado Springs Police Department. They don't fund my office. They don't fund the jail. Certainly their taxpayers do. I mean, Colorado Springs itself, those taxpayers get to vote on the sheriff's budget, just like Manitou does, just like Calhoun does. But you do manage a lot of things for the community. And actually, that's one thing I've really been impressed by the last few years is Sheriff Bill Elder has really partnered with the law enforcement agency to do things together that have really benefited the taxpayers. By not having everybody have the same separate service, they are combining more and more, and they're looking to do more of that in the future, which saves the taxpayers. But yes, my office is supported by the county, not any of the cities. So you're absolutely right on that.
Well, and I
That
think it's
answers
just
your
one of the
question.
things that citizens need to understand. You just said 70%, 70 comes from the city of Colorado Springs, yet they don't help fund any of this. So,
Well, their taxpayers do, but
They do.
They don't do it through city council, they do it through the county commissioners. And
Right.
your budget is more limited, quite frankly, in many ways than the city budget. But you're the ones who are providing that public safety protection for the community.
And to your point regarding the sheriff's office, if they have fewer deputies, less cases come forward. But in the case of Colorado Springs Police Department, they just up the number of officers by a significant amount, which means more filings coming forward. Yeah.
So you guys are anticipating my presentation, we'll have a slide on that.
Commissioner
I'll even
Vanderwerf?
have the latest quote on that. John Southers, I guess this morning in the paper, did downsize a little bit, but he's definitely increasing the police officers. He's going 8 less than what they originally proposed just a couple weeks ago. Still has a significant impact on my office.
Commissioner Vanderwerf?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. May. So these 2 additional courts, I guess 1 in 19, 1 in 20, and they may come, and then we may need to find a place for them. So it's my understanding, because I had asked Henry just a second ago, that there's some work going on behind the scenes to try to anticipate the physical location for these, and I know the courtroom's already a pretty tight place. If you're going to talk about that later in the briefing, that's great, but if not, just mention a few things about what you're trying to do for planning for that.
I want to mention, it really isn't in my planning here, but yeah, the kind of comes back to who funds this that Commissioner Littleton had asked about also. The courthouse staff itself is paid for the state of Colorado. But the physical courthouse is paid by the county. I know there's been some bills that have been proposed to make the state pick up the bill for the courthouse also, but I haven't seen that get any traction at all other than maybe 1 or 2 legislators. So that isn't going to change anything that I'm seeing in the future. Currently, so you do have to have the facility itself. That facility is pretty full already on their current model. The current model that they have over there is 1 judge, 1 courtroom, and that's been the traditional model across the United States for probably 200 years in terms of how they do that. Actually, Martha McKinney at my office did a little bit of research for us to look into that. The current trend is to look at greater efficiencies of the facility and the courtroom itself. I know in the past people have looked at night court. Quite frankly, that's very expensive because now you have to pay for the personnel at night, from security to everybody else. All of a sudden, you're doubling your personnel budgets in order to cover that. But actually, there's an agency out of Denver, and there's a couple others that can come down and study your courthouse. And I don't know if they're going to, let's say, 2 judges per 1 courtroom, or maybe it's 3 judges per 2 courtroom. But that's been the modern trend across the country now, is to look at greater efficiency of a particular courtroom. Because quite frankly, some of the judges, if they don't have a trial week, the courtroom can sit there empty. If they do have a trial week, then they need it. I know in talking with the judges, they even recognize that maybe not every magistrate has to have their own courtroom over there, and they may not need a room with a jury room. So there are some other possibilities rather than just building more space. Under the current one judge, one courtroom, you would probably be looking at building more space for them or finding it somewhere in the city. One of the things we discovered, for instance, is the city of Colorado Springs has a courthouse, down in Kiowa. They have some space they're not using. They are actually leasing some of that space, I think, to maybe the federal bankruptcy court, but there are a couple other spaces that could be filled out. So it might be an alternative to go across a few blocks to another area, although I think the better alternative is to look at more efficiency of the current courtrooms and follow some of the models and trends. I've talked to Nicola about that. I've talked to Henry briefly about it. I think a couple of you have talked about that. I'm not sure we have talked about that potential, but I don't know that I think you can, paying for a study to look at how can they use this current space is a lot cheaper than trying to build.
Thank you. I appreciate, one of the options being trying to look at, maximizing the efficiency of the physical property that we have. And thanks for the answer.
Okay. Any other questions before we let him finish his presentation?
This time, Commissioner Gonzalez, this time doesn't count against my, although we'll speed up later. You'll see that we have that. We were stuck on 17 district court that may go to 19. And by the way, that's just the numbers. I mean, they see how many civil cases, how many criminal cases, how many domestic cases. And there is a great burden in the Fourth Judicial. It is a state recognition that the Fourth Judicial is undermanned down here. That is a state budget in terms of who the personnel are being paid for, although you get the county budget of personnel that have to man the courts and potentially the facility. We have 11 county court judges, and there's no changes we're seeing there. We currently have 4 juvenile district courts. We'll go through that, by the way. My juvenile filings are flat or a little down, but the violence that I have amongst the juveniles is significantly up. We have specialty courts. We have more. Again, this is one of the things you can be proud of for our court system and our DA's office. We have more specialty courts than any DA's office in the state of Colorado. By the way, when we go to diversion programs, the juvenile diversion program we have was the first juvenile diversion program created in the entire United States. So we have a very proud history of looking for alternative ways of prosecuting cases. A lot of people think that prosecutors just want to put them away, lock them up, and that's all we do. No, we're looking for public safety, and if we can get through that through rehabilitation, it's actually a better process, a cheaper process, and if it meets our goals, that's what we want to do. Some people, quite frankly, in our area, I take a real high priority of habitual criminals, probably more than any DA in the state of Colorado. You want to keep repeating it, then yeah, we're going after you. If I take you off the street, I am actually getting deterrence by removing you from the population so you can't keep doing those crimes over and over and over. But we do a lot of, we really believe more, I think, than any other DA's office in second chances. How can we divert you? How can we put you in a problem-solving court? We'll give you a second chance. You want to continue being the problem at some point, we're going to take care of it at that end. So we actually have more people in specialty courts, more people in diversion than any DA's office in the state of Colorado. At the same time, we put more habitual criminals away than any DA's office by far in the state of Colorado. To let you know that sort of on both ends. We have a DUI court over there, which is actually for that multi-DUI person trying to rehabilitate them. Domestic violence court is actually, again, for the higher end where they're worried it's going to be lethal. Doug Miles runs that, does a great job. We have our veterans court, which is the model of the country. We have more felons, the highest, riskiest court in the country. We have felons, we have domestic violence. We were the first to do both of those in our veterans court. Nobody else in the country was doing that. Yet we have the lowest recidivism rate of any of them across the country. So it really is the model, and then we have our drug courts. Drug courts keep getting picked apart by the state, so each time they change, it's hard to model how well it's doing because you have to get a few years to see how that particular one's doing. Typically, it's been very strong. These are the 22 agencies, which you've got in your packet that bring cases to us, everything from the federal level on down to the Humane Society. So. The RDA's office, again, we have 8 specialty divisions in our office. When you're an office, if you're a real small office, let's say Canyon City, your people tend to do everything. When you're a larger office, you're able to specialize in areas. So that, for instance, SVU is really our sex offender unit. That's the people who are rapes or perping on our kids. You find that if you have generalists in there who are doing burglary, robbery, and sexual assault cases, you lose more of those sexual assault cases than you win. When we formed a specialty unit, we win more of those than we lose. And you really need to have that expertise. Same thing with economic crime. We have an economic crime division because it really does take people who are specialists. And you kind of see the other things we're doing there. One of them is NJC. That's unique to us. I'm the only DA's office in the state of Colorado that has a mediation unit. Cops, instead of giving a ticket, can send people to mediation. Actually, my attorneys, particularly in county court, as they see neighbors are going back and forth with different charges, you trespassed across my lawn, your dog did this on my property, your kid hit my mailbox, we can prosecute those all day long. It doesn't end it. When we get them into mediation, it actually has a very, very high success rate. So we, again, are looking at alternatives. The major divisions, district court is felony cases. I guess I ought to say that for those who aren't familiar. When we were talking about district court, that's our felony cases. In county court are misdemeanor and major traffic cases, like drunk driving. Juvenile division is everything. If a kid gets a petty offense on up to a felony, it all goes into our juvenile division. We handle 30 to 35,000 cases a year that we have to get out the paperwork and discovery on that. We talked about that one more. I don't know how much you want me to go into some of these other diversion programs that have been good. Now, the STOP program is actually one where the different police divisions can say, would you target this person? This is a real problem child for us. So that's a program actually will target particular defendants that the law enforcement agency is recognizing as being a real problem child out there. So that's a little different than some of the other diversion programs. Prescription, I do get asked about opioids. We do have people that get started on the opioids because of prescription problems. So we actually have a program where you can get diverted out of the system to begin with, so we can try to deal with you for rehabilitation and never get charged to even have the charge on your record by going into that program. It's one that kind of goes up and down in terms of funding and how well it's been used over the last few years, but it's trying to take care of the opioid crisis. This is our office. Let's see, I do have a pointer, don't I? Actually, you asked us this year to do a simplified version, so on the next page is your simplified version, which doesn't have names and everything else for those of you who we were requested to do a simplified version. On the big version, just to give people an idea, this is my county courts, where we'll handle about 22,000 cases a year amongst that group. This is my district court, where we handle about 7,000 felonies a year. As we talked about, a team, this is a typical team right here. Let's see if I can see the names. That's Brent Nelson is my team leader. He will be the team leader over that team, but he's also one of my major prosecutors for major cases. So the cases that he'll be handling the homicides there, other major cases on top of running these teams. So none of my people are just managers. All of my people are handling cases at the same time. He's got 2 courtrooms, again, with 2 attorneys per courtroom, which is a team for us. And then you can see the staffing with the investigator, the legal assistant, paralegal, and a victim advocate. And so that's why if we get 2 new courtrooms, that's setting up a whole other team for me within our office in order to handle that prosecution as we're looking forward. This is my investigations division. This is actually admin. You can see it's one of our smallest areas. We've got, this is where this is intake, I think, up here. Is that what I've got? Yeah, that's my intake with Amy Fitch, who heads up that and also does our economic crime. Teller County, actually, when I started, it was part-time. You'd go up there on Thursday afternoons and take care of Teller County. When gaming came in, that became full-time.
Question here, Commissioner Olds.
Dan, could you use the mouse? While the red pointer is good for people in the crowd, we can't see where you're pointing to.
I can.
Thank you.
You don't want to turn around. This is my we talked about my SVU, which is that rape and sexual assault on children. That's that unit there. This is juvenile prosecutions, diversion, and I'm not sure not necessary. Do you have any questions about it to necessarily go through all of that? A lot of you have seen that before.
Good.
That's the mini version you were asked, where you just see numbers and kind of the smaller thing. I told you I wanted to brag a little bit. These are awards that we've won over the last few years. The 2 new ones are just in the last few weeks. Each year, the DAs in the state of Colorado pick out 1 prosecutor of the year for the entire state. That is Donna Billick. Just got it in 2018, just a couple of weeks ago. We're very proud of her. She does a tremendous job, handles some of the most important cases. She was on the Tom Clements case. She was on the Montour case, to name a couple for you. She did a terrific job, and it's kind of nice to have her recognized by all the other prosecutors in the state of Colorado. Also kind of a brag is that her undergraduate is UCCS. I've got probably a half dozen attorneys that are undergraduate at UCCS. They don't have a law school. If they did, they would turn out very good law students too. But I found that the last one I think hired was top 10% in his law school class. They turn out very good students. They have a very rigorous program up there. I've hired a number of them, and you can see one of them just became the prosecutor of the year for the state of Colorado. It's very impressive what they're doing up there. Kim Kitchen, who's actually here in the audience today. She's my number 2. CDAC, I've been president of CDAC. We have a president, vice president, and so forth. For an assistant DA, which is the number 2, there are 22 of them in the state. The highest position you can get is first vice president of CDAC. So Kim Kitchen was just made a few weeks ago the first vice president of CDAC. So there's a little applause there, I saw. But you can see it's not unusual. Last year, Diana Colon was the Victim Advocate of the Year for all prosecutors in the state. And you can kind of go down and see we've had other prosecutors of the year or other outstanding people. We really have an outstanding office in the 4th Judicial. These are the numbers, and this kind of proves our efficiency. If you look at, probably the one we're here today, you can see our budget compared to the other major DA's offices. We are significantly more efficient than any DA's office in the state of Colorado. But we're very proud of what we accomplish at the same time. We handle more felony cases than any DA's office in the state of Colorado. So you can see by the numbers, Jefferson County with a $22 million budget has 4,300 felonies. I've got 7,100 felonies on a $14 million budget. And most of our work is those very serious cases. You can see actually our misdemeanor and traffic, our misdemeanors, again, are number 1 in the state. That's going to be a lot of domestic violence. That'll be animal abuse, those sorts of things. Our traffic, actually, Denver, they have a city attorney that handles their misdemeanor traffic, so they don't even have to worry about that. And yet they've got a $24 million budget, to give you an idea of how efficient we are. So we feel we're extremely efficient in terms of the cases we're handling. That's the 10-county one that you guys normally put out. A number of those are on there for you to see. You do have to combine Douglas and Arapahoe together, if you see up there, for the 18th Judicial District budget, because all that money goes to the George Brockler's office. Here again is what we handled last year. We typically average around 32,000 cases these days. We collected $5 million in restitution. That was number 1 in the state of Colorado. Victims' comp was $1.5 million. Was that number 1 also in the state of Colorado? It was number 1 in the state of Colorado. What? Oh, 2 in the state of Colorado. Well, we'll work on that one. Maybe our victims needed a little less money this year. I don't know. But last year, in 2017, now you see the homicide stat usually for Colorado Springs Police Department. Actually, I get the homicides for all the law enforcement agencies in the 4th Judicial. We handled 35 last year. We're up to 30 already this year. And 35 was a high number for us. Usually Colorado Springs itself averages about 25, 28 homicides. Last year, I think they had 32, is my recollection off the top of my head. I could be a little off there. But it was pushing a record year for them, which then impacts our office at the same time. Last year, we took 9 homicide cases to trial. Those are very, labor-intensive, multi-week trials. And so we have to put a lot of resources in those. This year, we've already done 12. We typically like to average about 1 a month, about 12 per year is sort of what we target in our office to take to trial. We had 219 felony cases taken to trial. Again, you saw we have a low budget, yet we did more felony trials than any DA's office in the state of Colorado. All those other major jurisdictions are probably around 100 to 120, maybe up to 150, one of them. But we're going to take a lot more to trial, which is, again, we're going to give you a break, but if you're a problem child, we're going to go after you. Means a little less plea bargaining, if you will, to get when you go to trial, you're not plea bargaining, but still you find most DA's offices, by the way, people don't know it, but across this country, about 97% of all cases are plea bargain in the end. By the way, since I'm commenting on that and we're on the public record, I'll note that our philosophy is we set a goal on a case. And if we can get that goal through plea bargaining, we do that. If we can't, then we go to trial. And we usually set that goal with the police and the victims at the same time, so we're hopefully it'll be on a common page. So we don't plea bargain for the purpose of plea bargaining. It's just that different cases deserve different results, depending on their background and the type of case. You can see how many days in trial we spent, which is a bunch. So far, we've had 170 trials this year, which I'm confident leads the state of Colorado again. Yes, am I getting busier? With the DAs did a study last year, and they looked at July of 14 to July of 17, and felony filings across the state of Colorado, actually for 5 years, were up 44%. I attribute that to 2.5 things, if you will. One is, if I go back that 5 years, my legislature decriminalized thieving pretty significantly and decriminalized drugs. And thieving and drugs are up across the state of Colorado hugely. Same thing happened in California, and they just did some independent studies that found that it was very much related to their decriminalization of why their crime rates, property crime rates, and drug crime rates have gone up. Thank you to my legislature for that. I'm worried in the next couple of years we're going to see more of those reforms. In El Paso County over that period, we're up 48% in terms of our felony filings. My law enforcement is increasing staffing. They have been going forward, and they're even going to do more, which gives me more cases. We just did a study 3 weeks ago, I'll say, where they asked every DA in the state to look at every felony filing and look at whether that person was on probation, parole, or bond, because I have had parole reforms, probation reforms, and bond reforms, and we were wondering, is that impacting our crime rate? Well, what we found in El Paso County is 49% of our felony cases are under some sort of supervision at the time they're doing their felony. These are people, 49, half my cases are either on parole, on bond, on probation, or over at ComCore. 2 people were 2 of those. I think one was on parole and ComCore, and one was on probation and parole at the same time. That's pretty consistent with what all the other DA's offices found. One of the DA's offices just did a study back, and it was either 5 or 10 years that they pulled, and they found that 5 or 10 years ago, that number was 25% in their jurisdiction. We have not done that here, but that's having an impact on me. We are, by the way, looking at more bond reforms, so I'm concerned about that they have appropriate reforms that we're really monitoring people versus just putting criminals back out on the street that are immediately committing new offenses. That's overwhelming my office. When I've got a 48% increase over that period of time, I didn't get staffing that matches that. CSPD has added 73 officers over the last 5 years. Mayor Southers indicated 120 by 2021. I don't know that he's changed that target. That wasn't announced today. He had previously indicated just a couple of weeks ago 60 of them would be in 2019. Today's paper downsized that to 53. But you put 53 more officers out there, I get more cases. They're able to solve more cases.
Do you have a metric that you're using to kind of track when you see an increase in the number of police officers that are generating workload? I mean, are you tracking that? Do you have like a trend that you can use from a budgetary standpoint? Or you just, because there's going to be a ramp up now, this is now where you're actually going to be able to collect data on that?
I don't have any data on that to give you an empirical of here's what it'll do. I guess I am going more on the, we know that when you put more officers in the street, more crimes get solved. I mean, that's the whole idea of it. And we've talked before, I very much look at the crime rate. We are still a relatively low crime rate for a city our size or a community our size or larger in the country. So we're always watching crime rate, but my office is impacted by solve rate. If they don't solve the case, my office doesn't see it. If they do solve it, I see it. You put more officers out, you solve more. And actually, both my sheriff's office and Colorado Springs Police Department, the citizens can be very proud of. They have some of the highest solve rates in the entire country. To give you an example, I think it got down to 5% homicide solve rate in Chicago this summer. Certainly, I think their top end was 15%. CSPD and EPSO are normally around 90% solve rate in that. So if you're going to do a murder, you better not come here. But if you're in Chicago, I can probably doing justice on the streets because the police aren't stopping anything. But that's the solve rate. This is my budget again. 95% is personnel, 5% is operating. Here's my critical needs. We have had this on your list for a few years. I know that salary and pay has been a big issue for the last couple of years, and I appreciate the commissioners have really targeted that the last couple of years. I put up these critical needs at least 3 years in a row, and actually last year we had a couple other positions, but we've pulled them off at the table. I've let you know that we need them, but we're willing to set that aside because looking at the other goals of the county. Now we're at a point that, I've been postponing this for a while. My numbers are way up, and so These are three areas that are critical needs for us at this point, and this is not related to the courts. This is just what my office has needed for a few years. If you remember, I introduced I think I introduced as 2.5 attorneys today. One of them was a part-time juvenile attorney we pulled in because we're getting overwhelmed by major juvenile cases. This is making that part-time now a full-time because it's really needed in my juvenile courts. We're just overwhelmed with these major cases. So that's the Deputy DA2 in juvenile courts. Investigations, it's just hard keeping up, particularly with all these major homicide cases we've had. And the same thing with our senior paralegal, trying to bring in staffing help to be able to handle those major cases. The youth crime, that's why we are looking at juvenile DA. This was an article by the Gazette that we thought we'd bring in as an example of how they're seeing, it's being recognized throughout our community that, quite frankly, across the state, the jump in juvenile violence. I've got a rise in gangs right now amongst my juveniles. What's interesting is the gangs are meeting together. It used to be sort of like the Crips were here and the Bloods were here and they feuded. Now they're actually working together to do a lot of these crime rings that you're seeing in the news. When you've seen those people who run down the street and do burglaries of homes and cars, those are multi-gangs usually doing that together that's caught on somebody's camera as they're doing that. They've been very violent where they're shooting at people that come out to try to stop them. And so we end up with a lot of that violence. For juvenile direct files and transfers, what that is, when a juvenile comes into court, we can ask the court to transfer them to an adult court. We've had the same standards for at least 20 years of when we ask to have a juvenile transferred to adult court. You can see up here that in the last few years, that's about how many, we'd average maybe 5 typically that we'd ask for transfers. Starting in 16, that's where our violence went up. In 17, I had 31 cases we transferred to adult court. The average charge was attempted first-degree murder. In 17, I had a huge spike in the number of juveniles murdered or the number of juveniles involved in murdering others, like we haven't seen. Again, I factor this towards some legislative changes we've had, actually in the direct file laws in terms of giving me discretion to file some. Now I have to go in and ask judges to do it, and in some of their decriminalization. But it is a fact that my juvenile courts are overwhelmed with these major cases. Then we talked already about the 2 new coming in, so that's just kind of a reminder, and I don't need to duplicate that. What we are trying to do is spread out that and try to lower the impact to the county on your budgets in 19 and 20 if these courts come in, so that I'm not asking to hire, July is when the courts would open, and I'm asking to hire attorneys in July to man those courts. So we're not hiring them early, so it'll be a cost savings in 19. I actually need some staffing of that first court, but we're postponing that staffing until October, so it again is gentler on your budget in 2019. And again, this is only if it's mandated. It is in your budget that you're going to be given that this, what's here on this board has already been put in the budget, I think, that you're going to be seeing later, and was agreed on by the other elected officials. But it's something that if we don't get that quarter, it gets postponed, then you can pull that out or postpone it another year. But it is built in what you're seeing there right now. And we've tried to really phase it in, if you will, as we go forward. What I don't know is typically what will happen, the courts could let that court start and just as it gets cases build up. More typically, they'll steal like 10 cases from each other division, and all of a sudden overnight you have a full courtroom. So we'll see. This is the 2020, if we get out to there. The 2020, again, I'd have a second courtroom, so now I have to have the rest of my staffing to go with that. It has a dual impact here. What we did when we proposed this with all the elected officials and what's in your budget currently is everything that isn't starred there. It's the 4 bullets below are already in your budget for 2020 when you get to see that. When I look at my SVU and economic crime, those areas are building, but the other issue I get into is sort of like when the sheriff looks at his crime trends, it's not only crime, but he also has to look at, can he get out to Falcon, can he get to Whitefield, can he get to some of the other areas, so you got to have staffing just to be able to cover the area. When I increase the number of divisions that I have to have my SVU and economic crime people to even get to the courtroom because they get spread out through the courthouse. So part of it is staffing numbers, part of it's just having the manpower to get to the 2 new courtrooms, and that's built in the budget. Quite frankly, when we sat down with the other elected officials, we did not put in the 2 courtrooms for the the staffing itself, or for the courtroom. The 2 attorneys that'll be in the courtroom were not in there, which are actually cheaper attorneys than I think my SVU and my the other. So it is something I'm asking you to add in if I get those courtrooms, are the 2 attorneys to go along with that. The amounts on that, quite frankly, I think it was $55,000 approximately for 2020 for those 2 deputy DA 2s that are not in your current budget. And then it's $100,000 approximately, 110. 111 for 2020. 222 going forward after that, because in 2020, we'd only need them for half the year. So I'm asking you to build into your budget, or to add that 111,000 in 2020 and 222,000 going forward for those 2 positions that are not in your budget that you're going to see today. Again, that will be provisional on whether we get those courtrooms or not. This is just laying out the critical needs for, these are the 3 positions we've had on our chart for a long time. This is not related to the division opening up in 2019. This is just our critical needs, and it is built into your budget already. This is the, if the courtroom comes on in 2019 in July, this is manning that courtroom, and it is, all of that is already in your proposed budget already. So that's the critical needs and the new court division, what the total is, which is already built into your budget.
Okay.
That's it. Anything else?
We'll open it up to any
It's a little
questions.
long-winded.
And any questions for anybody from the audience on the district attorney's proposed budget? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank you and the team for the innovation that you've got, in your office there, and trying to do really stretch the taxpayer dollars as far as possible. And I know you've got a big challenge over there, but I just wanted to say thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a great team over there. We have a great team of people. They're very efficient. They come up with all sorts of new ideas to make us more efficient and to try to get justice with also preserving people not necessarily having records and things. Although we're more than happy to give records for those who deserve it.
All right. Okay, seeing that, then thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we're on E.
That is correct. We are on 8E, Economic Development Office Budget Presentation. Deanne McCain, Economic Development Manager, Economic Development.
Good morning, Commissioners. So this is the first time I've got to make a budget presentation to you all. We have been part of the Budget Office up until recently, and so I won't have quite as much excitement as the DA's office
Yes,
did.
but what
Our org
gift,
chart there is
what
really
gift
small.
did you bring us? Because all the other electeds and department heads have previously presented us with gifts.
My gift will be
You
a
can-
short presentation.
Oh,
The gift that keeps on giving.
okay.
Here is our little org chart.
It's the gift that doesn't give so much, really, isn't it?
Exactly. Here's our organizational chart, including the Small Business Development Center, and then our other operations, which really are, we've got about 6 operations, including the Community Development Block Grant Program, Enterprise Zones, Business Incentives, County Housing Authority, and then any bonds that the county might issue. Those are actually, though, no obligation bonds, private activity bonds. In the Pikes Peak Enterprise Zone, you all probably know that this is really a state program. El Paso County was designated as the administrator of the program, which provides tax credits to businesses located in those enterprise zones, as well as nonprofits that qualify. And the tax credits result in savings into those businesses and the contributors for the projects. The boundaries are really designed to capture those areas that are economically distressed, where we want to incent businesses to locate, or for other purposes for nonprofits. So the qualifications on that, those are defined by statute. We can only have so many people in our enterprise zone, so we're very careful about expanding those. We also pre-certify and certify all the businesses that are interested in taking those tax credits. And then contribution project proposals. We have 60 projects currently brought in about $10 million that we then passed back through to those projects. Most recently, we received approval for Pikes Peak, America's Mountain, the Summit House project, Partners in Housing, which is a continuation of a transitional housing program. The current EDC, Economic Development Commission policies, require that contribution projects be reconfirmed every 5 years. So we took that project back and received approval for it. And then one that is fairly unique and new to us is Mary's Home, the Extreme Dream Project. And this was, there was a open house on that yesterday. I don't know if anybody was able to attend. I unfortunately was not. But this is an area over off of Airport, tore down 2 distressed houses and built a community center for the residents of Mary's Home, which are abused and homeless women with children, allowing them to transition into hopefully even home ownership at some point. Then we also process all the contributions that come through. Under the business incentives, while the business personal property tax credit, it doesn't require any action. Every time we meet with a prospect, we certainly tell them that El Paso County is now one of 2 counties that actually provide business personal property tax credits. It's my understanding that Jefferson County recently adopted that as well. We promote our revolving loan fund, which is a community development block grant funded loan fund that is administered by Pikes Peak Regional Development Corporation, our local CDC. Then we also have the commercial aeronautical zone. With the Small Business Development Center, the county is actually host for the SBDC. And currently, the state actually issues an RFP that community or organizations can bid on to host that organization. That will be due to the state in early November, so we may be bringing that back to you for ratification. They offer free consulting, practical training, business resources, and then a variety of workshops that you all probably are familiar with. In fact, there's one on October 26th for cybersecurity at the Business Summit there. Our Community Development Block Grant Program, El Paso County became an entitlement community in 2009, which means we received direct funding from Housing and Urban Development rather than having to apply to the state for funding. We utilize their 3 major federal goals in there, primarily to serve low of moderate income. Also, urgent need and slum and blight can be considered for funding, even if they don't serve a low to moderate income community. You all see us annually with the list of projects that we recommend for funding, utilizing our Community Development Advisory Board. Currently, we receive about $1 million in funding from HUD for this program. Periodically, the county will issue bonds, conduit bonds, no obligation. Might do that for nonprofits, multifamily bonds, or single family or mortgage credit certificates. The one that you may be most familiar with, or I hope you will get more familiar with, later this month, there's a ribbon cutting for Traditions at Colorado Springs, which is a 180-unit senior project over on the Powers and Tut area. That's a really cool project and has a lot of different elements to it that you'll hear about, I hope, when you can attend the opening. Then the County Housing Authority. You all created the County Housing Authority back in '93. It's not a traditional housing authority, owns no housing, does not have any Section 8 vouchers, was primarily created to administer the Housing Trust Fund. And in that, the County Housing Authority can provide loans and contracts to housing service providers to increase affordable housing opportunities. Recently, the authority provided funding to Grescio to purchase a commercial building that will now be converted to 18 units of affordable housing. And then we also are providing funding to the Salvation Army for their low barrier shelter. The Housing Authority also provides a down payment assistance program, 4% grants to home buyers. Unfortunately, that program, as the housing prices have increased, the usage of that has slipped a little bit, so we're trying to figure out ways to really boost that up a little bit. Then we have a single-family rehab program that we can only use outside the city limits of Colorado Springs, but do some private safety improvements, barrier removal. As far as mandates and state statutes, I mean, we're not really mandated by many things. We do have a lot of statutes that dictate how we operate, or federal programs, obviously subject to the Housing and Community Development Act. Those are all just listed here. It was one of the requirements of our presentation. Skip right over that. Strategic plan, again, this comes straight from your adopted strategic plan. These are our 6 main goals. No, it'd be 5. And it really governs what we do with our operations on a day-to-day basis. So as I mentioned earlier, this really is the first year that we're before you. Our office is supported both by Community Development Block Grant, County Housing Authority, which offsets much of our budget. We also receive support from the Enterprise Zone, Small Business Administration via the state for the SBDC, and then the SBDC does get some sponsorships that help support their efforts. We have no critical needs for 2019. So. Any questions?
Wow. Any questions? Any questions from the audience, too? Wow, I'm impressed.
Sweet. Happy Tuesday.
Very good. Thank you.
At this point, we are going to move around a little bit with the permission of the president. At this point, we would move to item 8I, Facilities and Strategic Infrastructure Management Budget Presentation. Brian Olson, Director of Facilities and Strategic Infrastructure Management, Facilities and Strategy. That's a mouthful.
Okay. Wow. Step on up to the plate. You a Rockies fan?
That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yes.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Brian Olson. I'm the Executive Director for your Facilities and Strategic Infrastructure Management team. I'm told that the shorter the presentation we have equals more money that will be given out, so I'll try to make this as fast as possible. So today I will go over our budget presentation. An overview on that is our organizational chart, operations and responsibilities, mandates and state statutes, our mission statement, budgetary highlights, which is challenges, and then achievements and our critical needs, and then OAB for 2018 versus the 2019 PBB comparison. So I tried to make this real simple, our organizational chart. It is more complicated than this, but for the purpose of this meeting here, we have the executive director who oversees our county facilities department, which includes our parking facilities and our mailroom. We have our city facilities, which I'll go further into that, but that's an SLA between El Paso County and the city of Colorado Springs to take care of their facilities. Infrastructure, which is that Strategic Infrastructure Management team, and then our ADA team, which is Americans with Disabilities Act. So give you a little insight on what we do at the county to take care of your facilities. We have our county facilities team, which they're charged with taking care of all our county facilities, which includes all the other elected officials, we have 4 parking garages, and we have our mailroom. We have 132 buildings, which equals about 3.1 million square feet. And with our 47 FTEs, that makes them responsible for about 66,328 square feet apiece, which is significant. As I mentioned, the county has an SLA with the city of Colorado Springs to take care of their facilities. It takes care of the majority of their facilities, which includes police operations center, other police department locations and their fire department stations. There's about 139 buildings there with 1.4 million square feet. With 15 FTEs, it takes care of that. It's over 95,000 square feet per person. We have our Americans with Disability Act team. So we have 2 FTEs for that. They're responsible for maintaining compliance with Title II requirements, which is access to the public facilities, which includes county facilities, parks, and right-of-way. Right now, they are working on a transition plan that it's in a draft form. They'll be coming forward to you here shortly to talk about how we're dealing with those issues that we've identified as they're auditing county facilities and finding deficiencies.
Question here, Commissioner Littleton.
Thanks. If you could go back one slide on county facilities, city facilities. So can you help me understand better? We have 132 buildings, and our FTEs are responsible for about 66,000 square feet per person, as opposed to the 139 buildings with the city, and they're responsible for about 95,000. Why the discrepancy between the two? Is it just that the city only funds us a certain amount and we aren't responsible for as much, or why is that?
Well, the square footage for the city, while the number of buildings is larger, the square footage is smaller. And so the FTEs that we have is smaller that we use for the city. They're direct, well, the FTEs that we have for facilities covers our maintenance team, it covers HVAC, it covers quite a bit more. So the team is much more diverse than what we have that's just directed for the city of Colorado Springs.
Okay. Oh, so because even though they have more buildings than we do, their square footage is about a third of what
Much
ours
less.
is. Okay,
Yes,
got
ma'am.
it.
Like, CSC is
Okay.
a large building, and
Yeah.
the courthouses, all those good things, yes.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
So again, ADA, we only have 2 FTEs on that. We have this, as you recall, in January of 2018, we did a restructure, and part of that was the creation of the Strategic Infrastructure Management Team. This by team, it's one person, and we hired a person in May of 2018. His name is Vince Masinskas, and he is creating a program and a process to ensure transparency in all the capital projects that are happening in El Paso County. And so he's having to work with Department of Public Works, parks, facilities, anyone who's working on a capital project. So what he's trying to do is always have a number of projects that are out there, the amount of money that's out there that's committed to these projects in a percent complete. And then basically to have a board, if you will, for you to see anytime on what's going on out there. At this point, the nice part is what Vince has done, he's using our J.D. Edwards software, which is our accounting software, to create this program. The only cost is basically the salary, instead of having to go out there and buy new software. At this point, he's in a testing phase, so we're out looking at some new projects. We can kind of test this new process and to see how that works before we start rolling it out. And I do appreciate, I want to a shout out to IT. They've been key to helping us with that, and Jeff's team's been great. And so total, we have 65 FTEs with your facilities and strategic infrastructure management team. So mandates, states and statutes required, really the only thing we have is ADA. All state and local governments are federally mandated to ensure that we have proper access for our citizens that have ADA issues to ensure proper access and fair access to our county facilities, which again includes parks and then public right-of-ways. So I'm going to jump back a little bit. Scott had mentioned in his presentation that they are looking at a study to identify where their deficiencies are in that, and I assume we'll be working together with them on how to fix that. You may or may not know we have a mission statement and a vision statement for the El Paso County facilities. I won't read it out here, but I do want to add, we have a new team, and I'll go further in that in my presentation, called our optimization team. And the very last bullet there, we've actually added that in light of that new team, and it's to continue to reinvest in new technology to better utilize resources and promote energy capacity efficiencies. Again, we'll go further into that, but I think it was important that we, keep on with times and continue to be more efficient in how we use our facilities, especially with energy consumption. So moving on to challenges. Like any other department, El Paso County facilities in our current employment market is struggling to both retain and to hire new talent. It's hard to compete with the private sector. We really can't. But as Commissioner Vanderwerf had said, times will change. So we anticipate that too. The other part, is money. Facilities budget is insufficient to do proper maintenance of our county assets. We are really managing based on emergency when we should be managing based on maintenance. We know that by doing that, it really jeopardizes many of our major functioning assets and drives costs up on how we maintain assets by often having premature replacement costs on equipment that would go down that we'd have to replace before its end of life. Lack of funding does create legal risks. I mentioned ADA, that's probably our best example. It's up to us to make sure that all citizens have equal access to county facilities. Of course, lack of funding does challenge us in serving both staff and citizen needs for our county facilities. Our last bullet point, I mentioned a capital budget, and as you know, we have started a new facilities master plan, a 20-year master plan. Once that gets finished, it's going to be important for us to think about a capital budget and how we're going to incite and make those changes that we will need to do. So what I have here is really a backlog in work orders, and we've done some analysis. And I'm not going to go into these really in detail, but I want to state that what we've done is we have roughly we have quite a few projects that we've had to backlog in El Paso County because of lack of funding. And by doing that, because these projects haven't been completed yet, what we've done is we've taken the 2017 costs, applied that to what those projects would be. So we have a deficiency of about $5.6 million of things that we would need to do. If they're not funded, we have to push them on to prior years, and as you know, that typically the costs don't go down, but they actually go up. Just as an example, what we've done here is applying that number on what that would represent of our budget in 2018 would be 58% of our budget if we were to do that, or 57 on a preliminary budget for 2019. So this is something that even a capital budget might even be able to help with as well. So I want to, enough with the scary stories, we'll talk about some successes. We have limited resources in both money and assets and people. I want to talk about our optimization team, and Phil Howard is actually in the audience here today. He's over our optimization team, and they've done great things. This team consists of 4 different people, and basically what they're out to do is reviewing county facilities or optimizing our energy usage and efficiencies and how we're using our assets. What they're doing is they're upgrading existing DDC controls, which is direct digital controls. That's how they automate the heating and cooling of these buildings, so they can control them from our headquarters downtown, rather than dialing from a control box on the wall, so to speak. They're reprogramming controls to make sure that we're getting our highest efficiencies out of those systems now. Reviewing utility usage by building, making sure are we using the right times, optimizing our times that we have lights on, optimizing the types of products we're using, LEDs versus HPS is high pressure sodium bulbs. They're recommissioning buildings, going through the buildings. A lot of buildings have had a lot of changes to them, so a lot of what they're doing is they're resetting those back to what their original settings should be, and then trying to optimize, the HVAC settings and cooling settings for our buildings. Some more success stories of the same team. They're working on LED optimization projects, and that's refitting our lights with LEDs. And it's been, we've actually have 4 proposed projects, and we've completed one, which is the parking lights, the LED lights in the parking garage at CSC. By doing these projects, we've identified a net investment of $367,000. And that's net investment after rebates. We've worked with Colorado Springs Utilities to get direct rebates, direct cash back for doing these projects, which really has cut a lot of the costs down on these. But the net savings after doing that is over $499,000. And these are direct costs that we start saving as soon as we complete these projects. So direct effect to our bottom lines. The typical payback, the average of payback is 2.4 to 7.9 years on these projects, which is significant typically on these types of projects as well, I might add. Talking a little bit more of those projects, what they're doing. we have what's called a CUP, or a central utility plant, and it controls the heating and cooling for many of our buildings downtown here. We've actually updated those DDC controls there at a cost of $28,000. So that's actually equates to $10,000 in annual savings. So that's immediate savings that we're finding by doing this work. They've done some changing the boiler sequences by updating some of that software there at the CJC. So really no cost to us except for our salaries, but then you can see it's equates to over $8,000 in annual savings for those changes. And then we have automated flush valves, and I want to talk a little bit about this. But the automated flush valves were done at the jail at CJC. The flush valves. We've only done in one of the wards, and I'm going to give you a little example of why it's important these types of projects are done, because the money we save on there isn't quite as big as the safety impact that we have too. So these flush valves, often they have jail cells that are above one another, and they're tearing their sheets up and making ropes, and they're tying contraband to those things, and they flush them down the toilet and to the person below them. So what they do is they both the upstairs and the downstairs are flushing those toilets repeatedly to basically overwhelm the system, so the guy or gal underneath can reach in there and grab the contraband. By installing these flush valves, not only do we save a lot of money in water wasted by doing that flushing, because what happens is it changes so they can only flush maybe 2 times in 5 minutes, but it takes away that ability to send that contraband down, which increases quite a bit of safety for our deputies and for the inmates as well. You can see some of the projects here. We do have more flush valves we'd like to do. We could save money on shower times that we do with the jails. But these DDC controls, I want to mention that why they're important is, if you recall, Target actually was hacked a couple years ago, and a lot of personal information was reached. And what they actually did is they came in through their HVAC controls, those hackers. So these DDC controls, by doing these updates, actually helps to ensure some more cybersecurity for El Paso County. So getting to our critical needs, this is what we've identified for 2019, and as we know, there's only so much money to go around, but these are some of the projects that we've identified, both in critical needs of one-time and then ongoing, which is mostly maintenance. So 1.1 million of critical needs. And again, this is just for facilities. And I'm going to move on to the next page. I thought it was important because ADA is important. I've separated those needs for the ADA team. There's quite a bit of stuff here, and I think I want to make sure you can see the category. It says high priority and moderate and important. It's all high to the county because it does have legal consequences. And the reason that category is on there, it's actually ADA has certain categories they assign to it based on the type of access they have. But it is, either way, it's important for us to have those, to take care of these needs. So we've come up to $677,000 for those needs that we've identified at this time. And again, they continue to audit the county facilities, the parks, and we'll find more issues as we go forward. But as we identify those, and we need to show transition how we're taking care of those issues. So our last page, what we have here is our 2018 OAB versus our 2019 preliminary balanced budget. So you can see there the 135 is some positions, 250 for some major maintenance, and then 167 for ADA. And we've actually, and I appreciate Sherry's help, because we've actually identified, as we look through restricted funds, how to find some money that'll help fund ADA. CBG is a great opportunity, looking at as an example, but that's what we're looking at here. I think before I wrap up here, I want to make a mention that facilities is really tied to every department here in the county. You mentioned, you saw the district attorney talking about the 2 courtrooms, and so that's our team that's doing the remodels for the courtrooms, the remodels for the DA's office. You saw Chuck Borman with the clerk of McQuarters office talk about doing voter boxes. My team's the one who's going to have to go out there and put those boxes in place. So each team is directly tied to our team, and we're glad to service them. And but the funding and the teams are closely tied with us. Do you have any questions?
And your request is already built into the budget, or are you requesting anything additional?
we have a total of the 1.1 million, but I think, what we have here, what would be given to us is, and I think I'll let Sherry answer that one better.
In order to balance the roadmap, some of Brian's items, along with other items, had to be cut to a lower number. So what you see on the roadmap is a lesser number to go forward in order to balance, but he has a lot more needs than what is actually on the roadmap. His needs are the 1.1 million.
Or not?
They are not built in.
Yeah, because at the very end of all of this, because my question is always going to be, is what you're asking already built in, or if this is something that we need to account for during markup? And if there is, then I need to know what that is, so that helps. And I'm sure everybody up here would agree.
This is, facilities and public works were always kind of tied together. So these are things that, the piece of the pie is only so big to give around. So, and I realize that. I think it's to understand this. We have significantly more needs than what would be able to get, but we know there's only so much money to go around as well. So.
Oh, I get it. But when I'm looking at that spreadsheet, and we're looking at, let's say, $2 million, I want to know if that $2 million, we can consider these other things that have been identified out of that. Otherwise, we're like, you're taken care of.
There's more there's more need.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to try to take care of some of the ADA needs with some project underspending we have in 2018. So we'll whittle a little bit of that down, but then we still have a lot of needs for 2019 that in the roadmap with balancing that we just couldn't allocate enough money to everybody, including.
Just produce a summary at the end so that we have that.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Waller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, boy, I tell you, here's a little bit of a concern here. Before we consider your critical needs, which are over $1 million, as I'm looking at this from 18 to 19, we've got about a 12 or 13% increase as it is before we consider critical needs. I don't know that any other department is going to be looking for a 10 or 12% increase. So, I see you going from 8.8 to 9.8 million dollars. What's the explanation for that? Are you taking on some duties, responsibilities from other departments, or do you just have that much more of a need?
Well, I can tell you our county facilities are not getting younger, and we are not made. These are monies that we need to start maintaining these facilities. HVAC units,
Elevators.
Oh, the Pro Garage. There's so many things I could go on and on and on. Things that we just haven't done. And again, we've had limited resources, limited funding, and I get that. So, but I think I'm here to say is to make sure you understand is we do have significant needs in facilities.
Commissioner Wilson.
Thanks. And I think, this is it's budgeting for maintenance as opposed to, having deferred maintenance, rather than needing to just go to a critical need that's an emergency. None of our elevators work in the sheriff's office or something like that, that we're budgeting ahead of time going, okay, we know that our family running our house needs to budget for, HVAC replacement and or a water heater replacement and or this. So just budgeting for those critical needs, I think. I would be interested in too, and just for, I think, future commissioners as well, some sort of a map that shows where our 132 buildings are, what they're used for, who's there. Because I get asked that a lot. People are like, how many buildings does the county have, and what are they used for? And so should we dispose of any of them? Should we, so.
Your comment is valid because, again, it goes into this master facilities plan they're working on, that we're just getting started. And that plan will state, we'll look at the health of those buildings, the age of those buildings. Is it worth keeping and throwing more money in there to keep it going? Is it worth selling and trying to get a new building? There's lots of options there. So it's good that we're doing this new master plan because it's going to be key to our how we go into the future.
Okay.
And I think you touched on one point in the fact that this is a new department. And so before you was all under another department, so you might be taking on some additional costs that's not being reflected in Public Works. I'm trying to help you out, throw you a
Sure.
lifeline, because when you're looking at the size, it's like, we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, and this might be the first time we're actually looking at it. So the following year, it would be, you'd be able to make a fair assessment on whether or not your budget has actually grown.
Correct, correct. I'm careful. Again, I understand there's only so much money out there.
Don't
I
worry,
respect
Nicola's
that, so-
listening to you. She's going to learn.
But, so again, a lot of this is just so I think the commissioners understand the needs that are out there. And just like the roads, there's more money, there's more needs than money out there. And I just need to put this out there. I don't think everyone's quite aware of what's happening because, again, everything works good. The lights are coming on and the heat and the heat's on, the cool's on, but they don't quite understand all that goes into the sausage of our buildings.
Commissioner Vanderweer.
Thank you. I'm happy that we're building a master facilities plan. I think that's really important because it gives us this opportunity to think of our facilities kind of strategically and to do it in a comprehensive way as opposed to maybe kind of having discussions over a singular building or maybe two buildings and so forth. And I know that we have some excess buildings, so the facilities master plan, I think, is going to help deliver a conversation within the county and ultimately to the commissioners about what we should divest ourselves of, which I think is going to help in the long run. In some of those facilities, we have them. But we have a really, thriving economy right now, and being able to release them from the county so that they can be used on the commercial side, I think there's a value in the county budget, but then there's another piece of value with regard to helping the economy do its job as well. I'm also aware, like say, you've got a big list here of ADA compliance. It's $677,000. You have the critical needs, 552. A subset of that would be some of these ADA compliance needs. And it's my understanding that from an ADA compliance point of view, so long as we are moving forward and fixing ADA compliance, even if we don't get to the full compliance list, that movement forward is helpful for seriously mitigating risks. So as long as, like if we were to zero out ADA compliance activity, that would actually enhance risk substantively for the county because once we get inspected, if we're doing nothing, then that produces a view of us not working on it. But if we tackle some of those, that delivers value and it actually perhaps almost completely eliminates liability risk, at least for that year, right? Because you're showing progress. So with regard to the chart on 15, the requested budget, the 9.8, bottom on the right, that is what's built. Just I want to make sure I know what we were having a conversation about. That's what's built into the budget today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you have obviously more than $500,000 in critical needs. So you are deferring some of them, and you're asking for $500,000 to deal with some of the critical needs today. And then you're building this facilities master plan, which is going to help us make better strategic decisions on a property-wide basis for the future. So that's all accurate?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And what you'd mentioned about the ADA, I think, is absolutely valid. And that's part of this transition plan that we've talked about because, we're not treating this like we don't care about it. We're not treating this like, these issues like they're not there. We're going to have that transparency where we can identify, we know where the issues are, and this is how we're dealing with them. And that we are making movement forward. Again, and that's something that will be coming forward to the commissioners, I think after the budget season gets over, we've been working with county attorney's team and working to how that transition plan will go forward and then coming to you and talking about that.
Thank you.
And just as a follow-up on some of the prior presentations that we've had when Nicola was presenting last few years, back in 2008, 2009, during the Great Recession, facilities took a very deep cuts during during the recession. So we are just now able to, after we've gotten a lot of other departments and offices caught up, now we're just now trying to get facilities caught up. So that's why there's a lot of sudden increases for facilities here. It's just the timing of it, and this is the opportunity we have to get them funded.
Okay.
We appreciate that.
Any other questions? Questions from the audience? Okay, great.
Thank you, commissioners. I
very
appreciate your
much.
time.
And
And,
I'm assuming that we're going to have a schedule jumper here.
Yes, I'm going to try to make the afternoon shorter, so we're going to skip ahead. And item 8H is County Attorney Office Budget Presentation, and Diana May, Senior Assistant County Attorney.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good morning. I'm here to give the 2019 budget presentation for the County Attorney's Office. In starting with that presentation, I just want to give a brief overview first of the organization of the County Attorney's Office. Obviously, the County Attorney's Office is led by Amy Folsom, County Attorney, and then beyond that, we have the First Assistant County Attorney, which is the position I currently hold. And then we have two separate units within the County Attorney's Office. We have our civil unit, and then we have our Department of Human Services unit. In our civil unit, we have 6 attorneys and 5 staff members, and we'll talk in a moment about just the different services that we provide to all departments within the county and all elected officials within the county. And then we have the Human Services side that has 11 attorneys and 15 and a half support staff members. As you know, we're led by our fearless leader, Amy Folsom. We always like to add a little bit of humor around the holidays, and so I don't know whether she'll appreciate this in her absence or not, but that's what she gets when I get to do the budget presentation, is a little bit of levity in the presentation.
Is that Klafke?
It is. In first starting with the civil division, I want to go through a little bit with the operations, just a 10,000-foot overview and then a 10,000-foot overview on the DHS side. We obviously represent the Board of County Commissioners, and we represent you in the county in a variety of different fashions. We also represent the administrative departments and any appointed advisory boards. Provided that there's no conflict with the representation of other departments and also other elected officials, we also represent the other elected officials and departments. We also represent the county in all civil matters, in civil lawsuits and tort suits against the county, based on our self-insured representation under the self-insurance fund. And then we also represent the elected officials in other county departments in a variety of civil matters, and I'll briefly talk about those. In addition, with our Human Services unit, they cover a vast area of matters, and it's not just what we know as in their Department of Dependency and Neglects. They are, first of all, on call all the time and providing legal advice to hundreds of caseworkers and hundreds of individuals within the Department of Human Services. And then when they get to court, they're representing the Department of Human Services, not just in the traditional dependency and neglect cases that you think of. That includes a variety of different types of hearings up to jury trials. But they also are providing additional services in the juvenile delinquency matters, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and then the adult protection services, so those cases where the department's involved with abused and neglected adults, and then mental health and alcohol and drug abuse. In addition to that, they're also providing continual training to the Department of Human Services. The statutes in the Constitution that gives us authority as the County Attorney's Office is, first of all, with regard to the civil aspect. The Constitution, Article 14, Section 8, talks about the office of the county attorney and the position of the county attorney, and then we also have statutory provisions that talk about that the board may also employ a county attorney. As far as the Department of Human Services side, they have a lot of different statutes that cover their obligations and their duties, starting in Title 19 with the Children's Code, Probate Code, and then continuing on to the Mental Health Code. I want to just briefly say, I know one of the areas that the board wants to know is how each department or office is supporting the goals of the county. And there's 5 specific goals that the county has. And I can tell you that the county attorney's office is supporting all of the different elected officials, the departments, and in the board in making sure we reach all of those 5 goals. And just an example would be, as Brian just presented on their ADA compliance. We have a county attorney that provides, counsels them with regard to that process. And that's just one example that each one of the departments and elected officials that are making their presentations we are somehow assisting them with providing legal advice and direction. I first want to start just briefly with our civil side. Again, you've seen this photo before. We always take a fun Christmas photo. This year we thought it was really funny to do it at Humpty Dumpty. And our civil unit has a lot of different hats, for lack of a different analogy or pun, that we wear. The first one is obviously representing a variety of different elected officials, and including the county and the board in civil litigation. As you can see, at the present time, we're at 23 cases. It's a year end for 2017, we're 29 cases. So knock on wood, we won't increase those than the additional 6 this year, but we still have a little bit of time left in this year. As you can see, it's consistent with last year, and there's been an increase since where we were in 2016. And what you can also see in the highlighted provision that we wanted to highlight to you is, of the lawsuits filed, the majority of these lawsuits, as you can see, the 47 lawsuits are by dismissal. And that's based on the aggressive defense that we have mounted in the civil side of the county attorney's office in doing aggressive motion practices, from motions to dismiss to motions to summary judgment. And we're very successful on defending the county and the elected officials in those suits. A couple highlights from this past year is we had arguments in front of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and arguments in the Court of Appeals, Colorado Court of Appeals. We're still waiting for decisions on those, but you have the attorneys with the knowledge and the qualifications and the abilities to do these type of high-level appellate arguments. One other thing that we want to highlight is we do this all in-house for you. A significant savings you have had from years in the past is we are not hiring outside counsel to litigate your matters. We are litigating them, we are entering our appearances, and we are doing that with the wonderful and bright, talented staff that you have within the county attorney's office. And we are saving the government rate, just so you're aware, that private counsel give us is $180 to $250 an hour, which is a significant discount. The only time we're seeking these type of outside counsels to be the lead counsel is when we have a conflict of interest, perhaps with representing more than one party. We also spend a significant amount of time, other than in litigation, doing Colorado open record review legal reviews, hundreds that we do on an annual basis, and working with the departments, including the PIO office. Just a little bit of information also, notice of claims are when people tell us that they may sue us. We have pretty consistent with 2017, 53 to date. We also wanted to talk briefly about the different settlements. As you're aware, because we bring these to the Board of County Commissioners for a public vote, we have had 3 significant settlements in this past year. Each one of those we've brought to the board for approval with regard to the 3 different matters. One was relating to the district attorney's office, one was the ACLU litigation, and then the last one was the excessive force against the sheriff's office. And we were able to, in that case, defend the county, but we had to seek outside counsel for additional conflict representations. We also want to highlight this past year, because of the experience in aggressive defense by your county attorney's office, we had a federal trial involving John Huntz. And as you're aware, from various different presentations to you, we had received several different offers on this matter from the plaintiff's counsel, which we declined. And we handled this matter in-house and were able to try this case and successfully litigate all claims in favor of El Paso County and the El Paso County Sheriff's Office in-house, without having to hire as the lead counsel outside counsel, saving the county hundreds of thousands of dollars. You would have at least paid your $250,000 self-insured retention amount if we had to hire outside counsel. And at this point, we are actually able to ask for our costs, not our legal fees, but our costs under federal rules. And we have a motion pending asking for costs that we had to incur as a result of defending this against Mr. Huntz.
Before you leave that chart, I think it's important to highlight that that's still the carryover effect from a previous sheriff administration.
That this lawsuit was against Bill Elder in his official capacity and involved allegations that transpired both during the latter part of the Makita administration and then some of the allegations, the actual termination allegation was against Sheriff Bill Elder. Okay. In addition, we assist the risk management unit in trying to triage and manage these cases or possible exposure or liability from the beginning. And we have a very good proactive interaction and working relationship with risk management to look at whether there's anything we need to do with educating hiring authorities or departments, building relationships and looking at these type of possible exposures early on. And we will continue to do that. In our employment section at the county attorney's office, there's been an increase in workload there, which is consistent with the national trend in the area of employment. But as you can see, what we do is we provide an annual update to our employment manual. In addition to that, we defend the county against any lawsuits related to employment, including EEOC claims or what's called Colorado Civil Rights claims. We have an increase from this year from in the years past. We also have an individual that can do what we call Title VII investigations, and they've conducted 3 this year for the sheriff's office, saving us thousands of dollars by being able to do that in-house. In addition, we this year began doing in-house training for the different county departments and elected officials, and we included volunteers this year, saving, as you can see, thousands of dollars to the county by doing these in-house trainings, and we developed our own trainings. The average rate we were paying for bringing in someone to do these trainings was $175 an hour. So again, with our staff, we are saving the county a significant amount of money. The other area that we want to talk a little bit about is our land use section. We have several attorneys that work, sometimes 2 up to 3 attorneys that are working on various different land use real estate issues. And this year, it's our 6th year where we have an actual attorney housed that spends a majority of her time over at RDC to provide legal assistance and counsel to the individuals at RDC. We've also been able to, this past year, assist in developing code enforcement ordinance update and also the new dangerous building code that was adopted with Regional Building Department. As you can see, we've had a very busy year with regard to code enforcement and land use and water reviews. We have 2 significant cases pending this year, Courage to Change, that's a land use case, and the Friends of Black Forest litigation. And we are defending those, again, in-house. And finally, for the civil division, the sheriff's office, it's the 4th year that we have a county attorney that's assigned to the sheriff's office. And that position provides 24-hour legal advice to the sheriff's office. In addition, we have provided the service of investigating Title VII related investigations and doing that in-house, again, with a cost savings to the county as a whole. And then, as you can see, a significant amount of time, in addition to the legal advice, a significant amount of time in assisting the sheriff's office in providing legal education and training in a variety of different areas. And when I kind of tallied up $175 an hour from this slide, you're talking about over $15,000 in us providing services where we're not having to pay someone to come in to do this type of training. With that, I want to move on to our DHS side. So we call ourselves CAT, C-A-T. So this is our CAT, Department of Human Services side. And we have a great group of hardworking attorneys that work over there. And as I talked about at the beginning, they aren't just doing the traditional dependency and neglect cases. As you can see from this slide, El Paso County has the highest level of dependency and neglect cases in the state of Colorado. And that's consistent with the fact more calls are going into the state hotline for dependency and neglect or abuse allegations in this county than any other county in Colorado. They are busy. There's no other way to say it. They are extremely busy, covering over 900 cases a year in just dependency and neglect cases. And these are very emotionally charged cases, and they do a fantastic job. In addition, this past year, in supporting one of the missions and goals of Julie from the Department of Human Services, we now have started to assist with juvenile delinquency representations. These are matters where Dan May's office is prosecuting a juvenile, and there's overlapping dependency neglect issues or overlapping family issues present, where we now have attorneys assigned to follow those cases, and we have 179 juveniles that we've worked on their cases this past year. In addition, they are very busy in dealing with probate matters. As you can see, it's a consistent in number, but within those probate matters are mental health cases, which are significant, and also assisting with, in that would be our adult protection cases on helping maneuver this court system through neglect and abuse of the elderly. In addition, we handle our appeals cases, and as you can see, this past year we've had almost a doubling of the amount of appeals that have been taken, which are very time consuming for the lawyers that are on the board. You know that there's very specific rules and a lot of review and reading of transcripts, but we've been very successful in defending those appeals. Some of the other areas we just want to also highlight that the Department of Human Services attorney sides are doing is jury trials. We've had 3 in 2018. We assist in the specialty courts, those courts that Dan May was talking about. We're there. We're there assisting, and we have an attorney there representing the department's interest in those cases. Legal advice on a daily basis, including 24/7 on call. We have 2 attorneys that are on call 24/7 that are getting calls every few hours on dealing with taking kids out of a home due to an emergent situation with regard to abuse and neglect. In addition, we have a significant amount of time that goes into training our different partners, including the Department of Human Services. And then a lot of our time, support staff time, is as we are required to do, is doing discovery requests or providing the actual required documents out to the different parties involved in the dependency, neglect, or related cases. One thing we want to talk about, and one of the first questions I think that I'm going to be asked if I don't jump in with this now, is we are not asking for any additional money. We dig deep on each side, and we continue to provide additional services and additional representation with the services and with the staff and the support that we have. So we're not seeking additional money in this next budget cycle. Some of our 2019 high-level goals that we just want to highlight for you is we want to continue to maintain and improve our relationships in this team approach, and also have effective cross-training and succession planning. We're doing some cross-training, so someone perhaps that may not have done employment may be doing some different type of employment, and in cross-training in land use. And then also we're able to provide additional and better services, I think, to our clients by being able to have that cross-training, by having multiple attorneys available to provide advice and counsel. We also have the goal of hiring, training, and retraining and retaining the best. I can toot Amy's horn for her since she's not here, but since she's taken over and you have appointed her as county attorney, we have not had any turnover during her tenure. We have a very good group from the civil side. There has been turnover on the Department of Human Service side, but that's not unusual. And we've also been trying to address that, and that, as you can see, that's one of our focuses for 2018, is to try to continue to maintain the attorneys and the staff that do a fantastic job on the DHS side.
Can you talk to that a little bit as far as the cause of the turnover? It could be stress, could be pay. I mean, just want to.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. While there has been turnover, it's not been significantly high. We had someone, for instance, Amy Markwell, who was the #2 over there, that got a county attorney job up in, I think, the Vail area. But we have had turnover of some of the other attorneys. And one of the 2 reasons we get is usually the subject matter, kind of like the district attorney's office. You're dealing with a really high-level stress in those types of cases that's constant. Their caseload is significantly high. They are in court a lot. They have very little downtime. And so a lot of the stress related to the nature of the type of cases and the high workload is one of the reasons cited. And then also in comparing us to other counties that are consistent with our size, the salary that's being paid to our DHS staff is not as high as some of the other larger counties, and we've had several attorneys leave for some of the other similarly sized county attorney DHS sites. We've also had some leave to go to the GAL office. So it's a combination of both of those, and we try to evaluate that consistently to see what we can do. And that's why we've been trying to make our focus in 2018 and then looking at 2019 on what we can do to support that side and provide less turnover to both the staff and the attorneys, and also help with their workload. And then finally, we also...
Sorry, there was a question.
Sure.
Commissioner
Yes,
Olson.
Commissioner
But just
Littleton.
to follow on Commissioner Glenn's comment on that and what your response was, would it help, possibly looking at and/or considering, an extra staff or pay raises for some of them, so that we don't have, because we know that there's a cost in turnover. There's
Right.
training time again, so doing the cost comparison between, change and raising some of their salaries for the, or dividing that load by adding another staff. So just think about it as something to present, if not this year, then the following year for sure.
And I do believe it is definitely on our radar for the 2019 budget presentation for the 2020. And what we're trying to do now is assess that and come to you with a concrete plan and with a specific requested direction from you. And then finally, what we continue to set as a goal for 2019 is to continue to work with our risk management on reducing our exposure and risk liability. That's, I think, one of the main, in providing legal support and advice, but also looking at areas that we can continue to improve in making sure that we, as you want us to continue to reach those goals that we have set. So again, I want to add with President Glenn's question that he had asked several other department heads or elected officials. We are not seeking an increased budget for 2019. We are able to, we feel, maintain the services and provide the services to the different elected officials and the board with what resources we currently have, with just working really hard.
Okay, working really hard. Yes.
Any questions?
Any questions? No, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we have a break, or our next presenter isn't until 12:45, so we have a break until then.
All right.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
We'll stand in recess. Okay, we're now back on the record. And are we picking up with 8F?
That is
the plan?
correct. 8F, Assessor's Office Budget Presentation. Steve Schleicher, Assessor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Steve Schleicher, El Paso County Assessor. This is going to be very quick because I truly believe brevity is well rewarded. I will share with you, my office is in a fantastic place. I appreciate all your support, and I would ask you to take care of our number one asset, which is the county employees. Thank you very much and have a great day.
I've got a comment. I got a question.
You get it. I know. Okay. I'll open that up to questions now. Commissioner Gonzalez.
I'll just say I thank you for your efforts. You do a wonderful job. And how many clicks does your website get every year?
Over 39 million, and it's growing with the new release of the assessor's website, the property record card, and citizen comper. So, as mentioned, things are going extremely well. We have really changed up some things in the office to allow for additional efficiencies and effectiveness. So things are humming in the assessor's office. Things are going good.
I just always think that's amazing. 39 million hits. So congratulations on all your hard work.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Waller.
I was just going to, thank you, Mr. President. I just wondered how many of those clicks were related to Louderman's dog instead of, actual efficiencies.
Stella's probably getting a third of those clicks. But again, thank you very much for your support, and I appreciate it. This next year is going to be extremely busy in the office with the 2019 reappraisal. So.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks for wearing a jacket today.
Absolutely. Thank you. The rental had to be returned.
Do we
Okay.
give prizes for the fastest presentation?
There you go. All right.
Absolutely.
Moving on to 8G, Information Technologies Budget Presentation. Jeff Eckert, Director of Information Technologies, Information Services.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Jeff Eckhart with Information Technology. Pleased to be before you today to brief you on the organization's technology needs as you deliberate the 2019 budget. IT is primarily an internal service function charged with providing for the technology needs of county offices and departments. We are witnessing a digital transformation that's underway within many county operations, improving the way we collectively deliver services to citizens. With this digital transformation comes opportunities for operational efficiency, lean government, and improved citizen experiences. But it also brings a whole new level of digital risk in protecting the systems and data that are used countywide to provide the full portfolio of services to our citizens. Our presentation today will highlight both opportunities and risks for your consideration. The IT department is organized into 5 functional areas as demonstrated in this graph, and I'll briefly walk you through each area and highlight the services provided by our excellent staff. Our infrastructure group is led by our infrastructure general manager, Chuck Short. We run 2 county data centers that host technology information systems for offices and departments and employees. These data centers host the technology equipment, think servers, that run core county systems, including email, network storage, and system-wide application hosting. Our products portfolio group, which is led by Products General Manager Jessica Caesar, is responsible for administering, troubleshooting, and optimizing the primary information systems used countywide. Also houses our primary project management and business analysis capabilities, as well as citizen-facing services, including websites and our citizen engagement system. Customer support is led by our customer support general manager, Kelly Mundell, responsible for comprehensive employee technology support. The customer support staff are the first line of defense for technology troubleshooting. They're the voice on the phone and the face that shows up when troubleshooting employee workplace issues. They will have one critical need request for office productivity software lifecycle management program. Information security is led by Information Security General Manager Steve Mack. This is our newest group, responsible for securing the information assets of the organization, which is a heavy responsibility. It manages the escalating risks inherent in today's connected technology world, and they'll have one critical need request for you to consider as well. Our technology administration group is led by our finance and procurement manager, Eric Blakesley. This group is responsible for technology-centric financials, budget, procurement, software maintenance contracts, and software licensing, and they too will have one critical need request for increases in software maintenance contracts. This slide, you'll see our 4 compliance mandates. IT partners with the Financial Services Compliance Officer to address the technology and physical controls aspect of these compliance mandates. Compliance drives information security policies, physical security and access policies, personnel screening, and network logical design. The new personal identity information law is driving many operational changes to how departments secure electronic and physical documents. This law went into effect September 1st, and we now have a county policy, which IT is a participant, to administer this new state law. Our strategic plan goals primarily focus on 3 areas: improving citizen electronic access to government services, retiring technical debt, and implementing life cycle replacement programs for technology capital assets and information systems. The highlighted strategic plan goals on this slide and the next directly relate to our 2019 critical need requests. So there's the second set of strategic plan goals, and again, the ones highlighted are covered or are directly related to our critical needs requests. Wanted to put up a few of our operational metrics for you. IT supports 35 internal business units. These are offices and departments and their sub-functions. I called out a few of the larger operations in this list. You see that we service 2,600 county employees with a staff of 73. We run 2 data centers, one downtown and one at CSC. And we support 3,197 unique devices. This is computers, laptops, kiosks, the equipment that goes in training rooms and conference rooms. Right now, we're averaging about 24,000 annual service requests handled by our customer support desk. I wanted to highlight a few of our operational initiatives that are ongoing, starting with the Technology Executive Council that was created in 2018 to work with IT senior management and elected officials and department heads to guide the strategies, programs, policies, and investments that are of mutual benefit to the county offices and departments who depend on secure, reliable, and modern technology. We have a performance excellence program to tune our strategies to meet ever-changing needs of our internal customers and rapidly changing technology landscape. This particular initiative helps us bridge the intervening years between the 5-year strategic planning effort. In an IT context, 5 years is an eternity, so we're constantly looking at our strategies to make sure they're in tune with the needs of our customers and the changing technology landscape. Our project management office focuses on consistent and efficient management of technology projects. This is a very busy function, managing 74 projects in 2018. Data center virtualization is the process of combining individual physical servers onto compute hosts, so you can house multiple servers on a single box. This saves power and lowers our HVAC costs in our data centers. Our PC replacement program has retired roughly 1/3 of desktop computers over the past 24 months, all of which were no longer under warranty. You've certainly heard about our rapidly scaling information security program, and you'll hear much more starting with our next slide. And finally, we're proud of the work we've done in consolidating systems and retiring inefficient systems, and you'll see some of the results of this in a future budget slide. With that, I'd like to bring up Steve Mack, our Information Security Manager. He's going to walk you through our critical need request for cybersecurity permanent program funding. Steve, as you see, is responsible for our cybersecurity strategy, our security operations, and our network operations. So, Steve.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Steve Maciejewski. I'm the Manager for Cybersecurity and Network. Jeff calls me Steve Mack because I learned very early in life at boot camp I could be either Mac or Ski, but not Maciejewski. So I'm Mac. So I'm here today to discuss cybersecurity and the current and future state of cybersecurity. First of all, I did want to thank you for your time today. And let me start out by saying the reason that we're here today is because every system that is connected to a network is vulnerable and it can be compromised. So some of the questions we asked ourselves as responsible security practitioners is what makes us an attractive target? Who is looking to compromise their security, and what is the level of sophistication involved? With that, we have provided a list of services and applications that make us attractive to the target. So as you're looking, election systems, criminal justice systems, property, financial, healthcare information, these are the things that folks are looking at to try to compromise either the availability or the integrity of that data for us or those systems. So it's our job to protect that. Needless to say that we are the target of a multitude of individuals and organizations, so that creates a very complex threat landscape for us. So what does that threat landscape look like? The threat, as I mentioned, the threat landscape has evolved and has become more complex. Cyber's primary mission is to defend the El Paso County enterprise from all internal and external cyber threats, protect our citizens' sensitive data and key services, and ensure optimal internal network availability. Now, this is a daunting mission statement, and when you look at the threat landscape, you get to understand how difficult this task can be. 4 or 5 years ago, you were trying to protect yourself from a script kiddie trying to hack your site, deface your site. Today, we're fighting with organized crime. We're fighting unpatched software issues, malware, social networking threats, insider threats, botnets. It's a cacophony of issues that we have to deal with. One thing I do want to make mention of is when we look at this world that we live in today, you need to remember it's no longer if we get compromised, it's when we get compromised and how long we were compromised. One such recent event was the city of Atlanta. So if we talk briefly about the city of Atlanta, I wanted to mention that in addition to federal agencies, state and local governments are also being targeted. The MS-ISAC, which is a multi-state information and analysis center, notified DHS earlier in the year that their computer emergency response team had identified and addressed incidents related to ransomware at the state, local, tribal, and territorial government systems level. It's holistic across our governments in the United States today. As we look at the slide here, the bullet that's most important to me is number 2, significantly impacted law enforcement. Police had to handwrite incident reports, which costing the department access to nearly all of its archived in-vehicle video systems. So we're talking about public safety at this point in time. So who and the why for the Atlanta hack? A group known as SanSam is thought to have been behind the Atlanta attack. They've already extorted over $1 million this year from 30 different organizations. Make no mistake, this is a money-making organization. They are here to generate revenue. They generate revenue by inserting ransomware into your environment and making you pay for it. The extortion amount to the city of Atlanta was $51,000 in Bitcoin is what they asked for. Atlanta did not pay it. Current estimates to date are it cost Atlanta $20 million to remediate. I do have a brief video I'd like to play for you, but first I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the cases that we're seeing today, just to once again reaffirm that this is not a new threat, but a threat that's been going on for a while. There have been 184 cyber attacks on public safety agencies and local governments in the last 24 hours, or in the last 24 months, according to publicly available reported incidents. Most everybody here will be familiar with the Colorado Department of Transportation. They had a ransomware attack, City of Atlanta ransomware, Mecklenburg County ransomware, Davidson County, North Carolina ransomware, which took emergency services offline, and it took that county more than a month to recover. Can you imagine being without your computer system for a month? Adams County, inside hack, one of the employees had compromised personal identifiable information for over 6 years before they discovered that she was in their systems and exfiltrating data. And then Baltimore 911, where they had a 24-hour impact to services for 911. Now, if we could play the video, please.
I have directed the surge of SecureWorks' various subject matter experts to work closely with the city's task force to get mission-critical systems back online as prudently and expeditiously as possible.
This is much bigger than a ransomware attack. This really is an attack on our government, which means it's an attack on all of us.
Another hack attack on a U.S. city. With Gianno and Katie, I'm not sure if they're coming back or not. We got breaking news, so we're covering what's ever in front of us. I got to throw out that damn teleprompter for a minute. I loved it. Shutting down substantial portions of Atlanta's government to this past week. Things still aren't quite back to normal as that city and these officials try to piece together the extent of the damage. Government workers beginning to turn on their computers for the first time since the attack effectively held their systems hostage today. I'm joined now with cybersecurity expert Morgan Wright, here to react to the growing trend. Morgan, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate this. We got a little disarray because of breaking news, which is actually a lot of fun to cover on live television. But is this becoming a national security issue?
Oh, it was a couple years ago. People just didn't realize it. Look, John, in 2015, the global damage from ransomware was about $350 million. In 2017, it was $5 billion, and it's growing. This is a weaponized form of malicious software, and it's designed to do one thing. On stuff like this, they go after healthcare, they go after governments. Why? Because they have to pay, because these are mission-critical services, and this stuff is mutating. Colorado Department of Transportation offline couldn't pay their employees. I mean, this is significant impact. So yeah, I expect it to increase over the next 3 to 4 years.
Morgan, how does the ransom actually take place? So you have something held hostage. I understand ransomware and the entire principle behind it. How do they actually pay whoever this is that's perpetrating these crimes?
Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency of choice. I mean, these folks have 800 numbers and customer service numbers that would make U.S. corporations, jealous. These guys are good about getting the money out of you. What they do is that you have to set up an account. You fund that account with Bitcoin because it's virtually untraceable. And then, for example, of Atlanta, I think they want about $50,000 or $51,000. And that's for a city to do this calculation. They're saying it's going to cost us far more than that to get our data back. So, unfortunately, some of these cities and counties, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, a recent one too, have paid the ransom.
Where are these attacks coming from? Is this a sovereign state, or are these just hackers around the world that are doing things to disrupt commerce and hopefully, make a little money out of it?
They've actually been both. The WannaCry ransomware attack, that was North Korea. They actually used some of the NSA tools, the Eternal Blue, to exploit a vulnerability in Windows in the server. In some of these cases like this, these are organized crime groups. A ransomware manager in Romania or Russia could make $150,000, $200,000 a year, and that's significant over there, and the people on this team. So it is all over the place. It is state-sponsored in some areas. Russia has sponsored this as attacks on Ukraine, but at the same time, criminal enterprises are the ones, they're after the money. Not so much Russia.
And it's one of the ways that Kim Jong-un is actually financing part of what he's doing
Yes.
with all these sanctions that are crippling, because they have a huge cadre of hackers from North Korea that are operating, believed, out of China, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, not only China, but in places like Thailand, other places outside that. In fact, North Korea attacked a lot of the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency exchanges in South Korea to do exactly that, to start getting some hard currency, stuff that they've been prohibited from by a lot of these export restrictions.
Over the weekend, a different hack disrupting Baltimore's 911 dispatch system for 17 hours. The question, I guess, these people, is this all just about ransom, or is this simply a foreign country? Is this tied in to the Russian meddling and Yevgeny Prigozhin and what he had with his IRA that was trolling, allegedly, the elections?
This is interesting, too, because as we start moving more towards a network-centric environment, it used to be 911 centers were all based on copper wire, the old stuff. Now they're network-based, so you can be anywhere. So the ability to attack these are increasing. We've got a brand new big public safety network coming on board called FirstNet that's also going to be IP-based. So these threats are going to increase.
Only got a couple seconds left. What's the best way to prevent this?
Back up. Don't click on suspicious links, and whatever you do, if you see something happening, call for help right away.
Morgan, that's great stuff. Thank you very much.
You bet, John.
So why are we vulnerable? As they mentioned in there, and I mentioned in my introduction, all connected systems are vulnerable. So with that core principle in mind, we have established a cyber program based on industry-recognized risk management principles. So let me just walk you through a couple of those milestones of the program over the last couple of years. So as you see, in 2015, a preliminary security audit was done. 2016, there was a deep dive external comprehensive assessment and review of the infrastructure, which produced a gap report. That gap report was then used to help develop the remediation roadmap for the county. And then also in 2018, we identified and implemented a county risk management and vulnerability management program. We were able to stand up security and network operations centers. And as we move forward into 2019, we're looking to mature and operationalize the program. So as we work to mature the program, I'd like to quickly just share the risk model for you folks so that you can understand the model we have adopted. We didn't go out and reinvent the wheel, but it is a wheel. It is a NIST framework with an additional section added onto it, which is training. Training is critical as we try to move forward and succeed with cyber success in the county. We need to have not only all of our users, but all of our elected officials follow security best practices. So having classes and a security program in place is a must for us. Our approach to the county risk-wide management was just not an IT issue. When you look at the program, we established a county-wide cyber risk management framework with the appropriate staffing and budget to support all the business groups. And it is absolutely critical to have this management level discussions of cyber risk with all the different business units so that we can avoid, detect, mitigate, or contractually transfer or insure against the different risks that we face. So as with financial risks, cybersecurity risk can affect the county's bottom line, as we saw with Atlanta having to come up with $20 million in funds to remediate. So the outcomes of Wheels Phase 1 and 2 is a foundational roadmap. Foundational roadmap is the slide we're looking at now. It's a big picture of the current cyber program. It discusses our people, process, and technologies that we've put in place to close the gap. As you see, it's a holistic 4-pillar model where we cover organization, governance, policy, tools of technology, and risk management. We are currently in wave 2 of this model. I'm often asked by folks outside of IT, well, what does cybersecurity actually do? With that in end, I've put together a mind map that touches on and identifies all the area of influence or impact a security organization has. As you can see, we're involved in the entire IT lifecycle, from business enablement, compliance, and all the way down to day-to-day operations. There isn't an aspect of IT operations that's not impacted by cybersecurity. So as we mentioned our risk model, I wanted to bring some additional slides in with as little data sensitive information as possible, but enough information you can understand the value of the model today. So when we sit down and we say, how do we assign or measure risk? How are we doing with addressing risk? This particular slide shows us what we call a CVSS score. CVSS is a common vulnerability scoring system. So scores are based and calculated on a formula that depends on several metrics that include the approximate ease of exploit and the ability to impact the systems that's exploited. The number that I want you to really pay attention to is the score of over 7,000, 7681. These are our critical infrastructure servers within our organization, and that is a risk score assigned to that server this January. As of August, the score has been remediated substantially, so we're at 2,800. This was done to a large effort of support from within the IT group and within our business units. We went through and upgraded operating systems, patched boxes, changed configurations in order to secure our environment. And as we did that from an IT perspective, we had to have support from the enterprise team, from the networking team, from the cybersecurity team, from the application teams, and then from the business units themselves to test all the changes that we made to that environment. So without the help of the other business units in the county, it would have been a much more difficult process. They all signed up and stepped up and helped us get this accomplished this year. And this is an amazing result to close that risk gap substantially within a year. So one of our other investments that's already paying dividends for us as well, and it's not just in the reduction of risk, but it's a hard cost investment. So we purchased a solution for secure email called Mimecast. I know many of you have experienced the Mimecast solution already. I'll leave it at that. I've got a slide here that highlights a typical Mimecast scenario. So this is a real world scenario that happened earlier this year. We gathered all the metrics, and I wanted everybody to understand that we get 1.5 phishing emails a week is what we average. And by phishing emails, if you look at this typical event here, this isn't, like I said, not a big one, it's not a small one. 726 emails came into our infrastructure that were considered malware. 280 of those copies were automatically rejected. 240 were placed on a held queue, and we later manually removed them. 112 copies were accepted by the email server, which means they made it through the Mimecast to our internal exchange boxes, and 94 copies were bounced for invalid email reasons. So typically, there's a huge cost associated with remediating an attack like this. With the Mimecast solution in place, it costs us less than 6 hours. We rounded up to 6 hours of support in order to clean up these incidents, check all the machines, make sure nobody was infected, and the malware did not take root within the system. Before Mimecast, this would have been an average of 24 hours of cybersecurity time, 30 hours of service desk time, 8 hours of enterprise time, 32 hours of lost user productivity impact, total of 94 hours, about $4,700. Or it costs us about $366,000 a year just on malware that comes through email. And let's be clear, 90% of malware malware and Trojans come through email, whether it's through an attachment or a link that's embedded to a bad website.
Commissioner Walker.
Ask a very rudimentary question. For that to impact your system somewhere, infect it, you have to actually open the attachment or click on the link, correct?
Traditionally, yes.
Yes, and people will do it more than once because nothing happened the first time. Just
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you. So you've got a large number of phishing attacks and what happened here. But I think, if I understand correctly, the vast majority of these were detected in advance of them going to county employees, right? So this is kind of stuff that you're doing behind the scenes, and you're actually preventing them from even getting to us where we would either possibly reject them or possibly accept them.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
When you look at the amount of attacks that we see, over the last 3-month period of time, we saw almost 600,000 attacks to the infrastructure. Of those 600,000, about 4,000 made it through our perimeter protection systems into the internal systems where our secondary line of defense was able to identify, remediate, and stop. That's the war that we fight every single day.
So when we get something new from a new email address or whatever, and it's presented to us under Mimecast, there's a reasonable chance that we may or may not want that email, but there's a reasonable chance it's not a phishing attack because you've already cleaned those out before it comes to us. And I know because, in Mimecast, it's sometimes hard to know if it's a phishing attack or not because I think it only presents the title of the email within that message, and the title might look like a legitimate, topic.
So Mimecast has the ability, the tool that we use today has the ability to do what we call deep inspection of technology. So the attachments that come through you, they are inspecting the attachments. If it's a zipped and encrypted attachment, it'll also try to unzip it and view that attachment as well. And it's looking for malware signatures and or attributes that would determine that it's not beneficial to the county. So. All right, as we move forward, I wanted to briefly just share some industry standard statistics. It's kind of a complicated chart, so I just wanted to very quickly explain it. I have 3 separate slides from Gartner. And the information you see is from their IT key metrics data survey that they perform annually. Light blue line is a spending range from all the respondents, which approximately on this chart is 1% to 25%. The middle quartile, or the Goldilocks zone as I like to call it, because I can't say quartile very well, shows approximately 3 to 8%. So the industry average for percent IT spending is 6.2. Currently, El Paso County is running at 8%. The reason we're running at 8% and slightly above the average is due to the investment needed to catch up for the lack of spending over the last few years. We're trying to close a 4-year gap. Next slide is IT spending per employee. Same premises on how the slide is defined. Once again, looking at the Goldilocks zone, which is where I like to focus. The average is $1,171 per employee. We're currently spending about $416 per employee. That's excellent. That goes with the Jeff mantra of trying to do more with less. We work very efficiently, and we've built some processes that help us out substantially.
So I just want to point out real quick, on the last slide on this slide, the EPC IT request of 8%, that's after our 2019 critical need. So if we get that dollar figure, we'll be at 8%, wanting to show you where we stand with regards to other organizations. Similarly, if we get the critical need funded for 2019, we'll be spending $416 per employee, where the national average is closer to $1,200.
And then the third and final slide I have from Gartner. The number to note here, once again, is the number of dedicated employees per percent of total IT full-time employees. So average across the industry is 5.9% or 6%, and we're at 5.4%. So once again, slightly below average in the industry today. And my last slide, try to pull everything together just so everybody can understand what we're talking about. Permanent cybersecurity positions. Brand new to the IT organization as of this year. Security operations systems, email security, the advanced firewalls that we're continuing to deploy, additional network monitoring equipment, and identity access management, multi-factor solutions, so the 2-factor token solutions. That's our ongoing funding request and our one-time funding request. Network segmentation, data loss prevention, which allows us from leaking sensitive information outside of the organization. Certificate and key management for encryption and SSL certifications, virtual private network upgrades that we're implementing now. And then last but not least, certainly, is the data classification and encryption program, where we go out and do the analysis and identify where all of our sensitive information is, make sure that we encrypt those repositories and those individual devices that have that information so that we don't have it leaking to the public.
So I'll pause right here and ask the board if there are any questions related to the cybersecurity critical need request.
Is that built into the budget, or is this?
My understanding it is in fact part of the preliminary budget.
Okay. Any other questions? Great.
Thank you.
Next, I want to bring up our customer support manager, Kelly Mundell. Kelly is responsible for the call center, desktop computing, and internal communications from a technology perspective. The critical need he'll be presenting is a Microsoft Office Lifecycle Replacement Program. Kelly, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So, before you begin, how much time do you take up with Commissioner Littleton and Gonzalez?
Plead the fifth.
I couldn't resist.
I have improved greatly over the last 4 years, have I not, Kelly?
Yes.
Have we seen each other in the last 3 years?
No, we haven't seen you in a long time, Commissioner.
Commissioner Gonzalez doesn't know how to open email attachments, so he's easy.
So good afternoon, Commissioners. Kelly Mandel, I'm the Customer Support Manager for your County IT Department. Happy to announce that I'm averaging approximately one visit in front of the board every 12.5 years.
Okay. Thank you.
I think Jeff's trying to significantly impact that number. This first slide here, as many of you know, we do have a PC replacement program that's in place. We get funded. When we can get funded for that, we replace PCs across the county to get rid of some of our technical debt. We've also had a printer replacement program, but since 2007, we have not had a Microsoft Office product software replacement program. So since 2007, we haven't been doing that. And this slide shows where that has gotten us. I'll explain, there might be a little confusion, I imagine, about in-use and replacement totals. So you can see we have 440 versions of Office 2003 in use currently. Go down the line of those older versions of software products that are currently in use. And I'll explain the replacement total here in just a minute. So the slide shows the current state of our Office product installs. Office products 2010 and older and our 2010 Exchange email server are no longer eligible for technical support and receive no bug fixes or normal patches. Office 2003 and 2007 received no support or patches of any kind, including security updates and patches. Difference between the in-use and the replacement total columns is due to departments having both supported version of Office and at least part of an unsupported version installed. For example, in the case of Office 2003, the top row, 119 machines have just that version installed, and there are 320 machines that have at least a component of Office 2003 and a supported version of Office installed. The $1.1 million total at the bottom is what we would need to spend today just to get us one-time spending up to a situation where all our Office products are at a point of support and receiving patches. Oop, went too far. Thank you, sir. All right, on the left, basically kind of reiterates that first slide. Our current Office replacement model has been done at the discretion of county offices and departments. That model has been ineffective at keeping Office versions in a supported state and at reducing our risk. On the right is our critical need request, an Office lifecycle replacement program that would require an ongoing investment of $600,000. And that investment would provide us, our organization, lower the risk to our organization, increase compatibility with operational systems and security software. For example, our secure encrypted email plugin for Office does not work with those older versions of Office. So if you had anything older than 2010, you could not use that Mimecast plugin. This would help us maintain compliance with CJIS requirements, retire or isolate unsupported versions of software, implement a 3-year replacement cycle. We'd go to cloud-based email as well as secure cloud-based file storage, and implementation would be based on a 2-tier model to save on licensing costs.
Any questions about the office replacement program critical need request?
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you. So you've got a $600,000 bogey there, and what does the $600,000 do? Does it replace the 2003, 2007, or does it replace everything? Or, is this ongoing as in year after year after year you need 600K? So kind of just flesh that out for me a little bit.
So what we'll move to is a cloud-based Microsoft Office model called Office 365. So as new versions of the software are released, we will automatically get those. We'll also be moving our email from an on-premise Exchange server environment to cloud-based email. So we will no longer have those 3 to 5 year cost to upgrade our Exchange server. So you're moving from buying a license and operating the software on-premise to buying a cloud subscription and getting updates annually as they come out from Microsoft.
Now, that's a cloud subscription, but that's not putting the data in the cloud, right? We still leave that on our servers?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, so the emails themselves will flow through the Microsoft Exchange online environment, but it does not include your local file shares. The documents and files that you store locally will continue to be stored locally.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Good.
Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Littleton.
Thanks. Kelly, I do have one question. I don't know who can answer this, but so just, looking at and going on, just information that's been recently released and having been on the cyber team out in Washington, D.C., when we know that, so many of the computers now are already embedded with malicious software, or not software, but the malware on that. How do we protect ourselves against that? Are we even purchasing products made in the U.S., we know that they buy parts from China
I'll defer to the cyber
Okay.
expert, Steve Mack.
Right.
So we have fundamentally shifted on our technology and our solution for detecting and moving malicious viruses from your PCs today. The old model would be we'd scan your machine and look for a file that matched a particular pattern, and then we call it malicious and remove it. Now we've got a tool in place, a product in place that is hooked into the Microsoft operating system, and when you execute something out of the norm, it evaluates that and it will determine whether or not it should run or not, and it will shut it down. So we have some updated technology to prevent malicious Trojans and malware from executing on your local machines.
Okay. Just from the hardware perspective then.
Is a software package that we've implemented on
Right.
all of the endpoints within the enterprise as part of our endpoint security program.
Okay. Thank you.
Lastly, I want to bring up Eric Blakesley. Eric does technology administration for the IT department, including technical finances, purchasing, and asset management. He's going to talk to you about a software maintenance contract increase that's been on our roadmap for the past 3 years. Eric?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This request is for $350,000, and as Jeff mentioned, it's been on our roadmap since 2016. And I've highlighted a few of the large vendors that keep our critical services up and running on a day-to-day basis. This annual maintenance really provides two different security measures for us. The first is it provides patches to us. And as you've heard from previous people, Kelly and Steve, that the security patches is a key part of that. Secondly, it provides phone and web-based support in case services go down. We have the ability to reach out to the vendor and get that rectified as soon as possible. Historically, we've seen about a 5% increase in the software maintenance costs on an annual basis. And it now consumes about $2.4 million of the IT budget, and that represents about 21% of the total budget. And with this increase, we've seen our ability to fund capital needs for our network and data centers the last couple of years, and a lot of these infrastructure, these capital needs have been aging, and we know that we want to move away from that and have a plan to rebuild that infrastructure. This slide goes back to 2015, where we were about $2 million in software maintenance, and as you can see in 2018, I'm projecting that to be about $2.4 million, and that's an increase of about $367,000 in the 3 years. The area in the purple shows the annual increase and the percentage that it's gone up from the year before. You may note that in 2018, it's only about a 2.6% increase, but we've worked really hard in the last 18 months to reduce our maintenance costs by making purchases.
Retiring old systems.
And retiring old systems, yep.
Consolidating information systems.
Yep. Next slide. The next slide represents our 2018 operating budget at $11.6 million. The 3 critical needs that were just presented to you total $2,050,000, and that gets us to our requested budget of $13.6 million.
Question here, Commissioner Littleton.
Thank you. So, and I know, Commissioner Glenn and I were here at one point in time when that, big decision was made, I think, to go with Oracle and some of the other ones. The sad thing is it's like with radio systems, right? Whether it's Motorola or others, some of these you get in and it's like they hold you hostage, and every year they just keep increasing it. I'm glad to hear that you guys have gone back, really tried to consolidate, eliminate those programs that are no longer, that are either duplicative or didn't do what we needed them to. But, it's one of those things potentially to even begin looking at in the future. It's a market-driven decision, right? Unless there's something else out there that's competitive that can replace it, they really do have you over a rock and a hard place. So I appreciate you guys continuing to looking to see what the market brings forward, and, potentially, even if it's costly, making a jump in the future, if it's going to cause someone to go, oh, they're going to leave, maybe we'll go ahead and freeze and just do contracts to say we're not going to increase it for X number of years. So, but I appreciate you guys doing that. Thank you.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, we have to take care of these kinds of issues, but I find it interesting that our software maintenance contracts costs continue to go up, and in so many other technology arenas, because there is a market, because there is competition, technology costs are going down rather than going up. So here we have kind of the reverse of that happening here, and I am and remain very concerned that there doesn't, maybe there is, and I just don't know about it, but there doesn't seem to be a real competitive market here. It seems like Microsoft is kind of, owns the market, and there are not really good alternative choices, and I really hope that that gets changed, because we have this place where it just goes up and goes up and goes up. It doesn't go the other direction.
Correct.
Yeah, so I remain concerned about that, and I just hope the market corrects itself, because there should not be one company out there that basically owns the market and then can basically charge whatever they want.
And Stan, it was Oracle and Cisco too. When we were here and being given that presentation 5 years ago?
It was 2011.
11, okay.
And then again in 14.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions for the IT department?
Any other questions?
I just have something that's kind of funny. So Mimecast did a block on my national cybersecurity brief letter. Just wanted to
Well, that's
say.
what you think it is. Maybe it wasn't that kind of email.
I just got it and I'm like, oh, thank God it finally let it through.
Cool.
Thank you for your time this afternoon.
All right, thank you.
And just real quick, on the last slide here for anybody who's watching, the PowerPoint online, or this PowerPoint is correct. The document in your book and also the PDF online, this slide has an incorrect number on it, but we will repost that just right after the meeting. It's the last number out there. The one online says it's 12 million something, but the correct number is the 13,660,000.
Oh, okay. Great.
And yeah, that is our final presentation for today. So the next presentations will start right after the first part of the board meeting on Thursday.
Okay, great. Any follow-up questions or anything before we move to the next agenda item? Okay, thank you very much. Then I will call item number 9.
Item number 9, addendum. I'm unaware of an addendum.
Okay, and before we call item 10, we do have a jail tour tomorrow. I know I'm going. I think it starts at 1 o'clock.
Correct.
It's part of our yearly requirement to inspect but be able to leave the jail. So
One time a year, get out of jail free card,
that's
right?
exactly right. Okay. Item 10.
Item number 10, executive session. There's not a request for an executive session.
Okay, then we are adjourned.